Candy Nelson, and we are coming to you live tonight on YouTube. And tonight we're going to do something different. It is going to be a podcast call-in with a bunch of other people that have been calling into the M-Call podcast. And I'm getting ready to have them join us here soon. Candy Nelson, are you ready? Because we're getting ready to go for this.
I am
It's
ready.
It's going to be a little different tonight for sure. So, okay,
Yeah.
She's ready, guys. So here we go. We're calling the number. See what happens here. Make sure I can see with my Googlies.
Thank you for choosing freeconferencecall.com. You are helping people around the world communicate for free. Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. If you are the host, press star now. Otherwise, please wait and you will be joined into the conference.
We're waiting.
The recording has started. Please announce yourself.
Hey, hello, who do we have here?
Hi there. This is Lisa Hicks with Waking God's Child and Candy Nelson.
Hi.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you guys on here. We have our call right now. We're waiting for more people to join our call. If you hear bells in the background, that just means someone else is coming on.
Gotcha.
So just disregard the bells if you hear them. But we're all on here. We're anxious. Where do you want me to start? Do you want me to tell you a little bit about myself and how we started the call?
Yes, if you would. So we're live right now, by the way, on my YouTube channel, on Waking God's Child. So anyone that wants to tune in also on television, you can go to the YouTube channel Waking God's Child, and you should see the little icon below that will say Morgellons M-Call podcast. That's what it's titled as. So yes, Mark, if you'd please go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, we would really love to hear.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to make this brief and quick. My name's Mark, Mark V, and I've had this affliction. I'm not going to call it a disease. I'll call it an affliction. I've been symptomatic for about 6.5 years. Contracted it, I believe, by bringing an infected dog into my home, which also infected my other dog. He was
Did we lose him?
contracted it. I have 2 daughters, and at the time we're living in my house. They don't live there anymore, but they did not, as far as I know, they do not have symptoms. I know they have the affliction inside of their bodies, but they don't, they're not exhibiting any symptoms. Now, with that being said, let me jump across to the call. I started the call about 5 years ago, and I belong to a call that was a less EMF call. And I got some really good friends. I have a very dear friend who's on this call right now, and I'll let her introduce herself because she's my partner in crime. She's a beautiful woman inside and out. She's very well rounded on EMFs. She lost her son to glioblastoma brain cancer at San Diego State University in 2009, and she's been the fight of her life. She's won a couple of class action lawsuits. And she's brought wonderful guests and people to my call, and I've had the likes of Dr. Terry Madej and Judy Mikovits and we've had a lot of prominent people on this call thanks to her and Rob Rubin from TransparentMediaTruth.com. Rob works with Clifford Carnicom closely. He's brought a lot of guests on our call as well. So I started this call, and I was plucking people off of other calls because it's basically like I want to save their life because they're being bamboozled. Snake oil salesmen are out there, and they're stealing people's money, and they're giving them false hopes. They're giving them protocols that are false. They're using the placebo effect. It works for a while, but it doesn't work for a long time. I learned many years ago that this thing was electromagnetic. It uses frequencies. This thing is a demonic entity. It's absolutely from Satan, from the pit of hell. And it is feeding off of our electricity in our bodies. Just before you joined us, ladies, we were talking amongst ourselves, and there's a gentleman on our call. He found a shoe box in his house, and anyone could mistake it for cobwebs, but I have the same thing in my house. These fibers coagulate, and they form a network. I have them on my hood range of my stove, and they seem to really enjoy electrical appliances. They go where they seek energy. And what's interesting, Lisa, is I know you're going to agree with this, movie, The
Yes.
Blob. If you guys remember the
Absolutely.
original 1959 classic, The Blob was small, and it was an outer space entity. It was an alien, and they were trying to kill it with electricity, but they found out that every time they put electricity to it, it grew twice the size. And I just find it very interesting that this thing kind of behaves like the Blob, especially the black goo aspect.
Yes.
And there's some people that have to deal with that nightmare. We've had people on our call. I had a lady who was, she's no longer with us. I mean, I don't know. I hope she's okay. We have people that come on and drop off all the time. But she was shaving her legs one day, and she called me hysterically saying that she cut her leg, but she wasn't bleeding. It was literally black, thick goo coming out of her wound.
Right.
You can't make this stuff up, and it's unbelievable. But that's pretty much my bio, and we have our call, and we have people on here and guests, and we've had our call every single Saturday for the past 5 years. I don't think we missed a beat.
All right. Well, thank you very much for introducing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that introduction. That says a lot, and you sound like you're on the same page as what we all are, correct, Candy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else you'd like to add, or you want to bring your guests on?
Yeah, well, the guests are all on. They're here. They're not muted or anything. They're all behaving and quiet.
Aw.
So if we get any noise in the back, we'll have to deal with that later. But,
Hi, guys. Nice to meet everyone.
Yeah, say hi, everybody. Everyone say hi. But
Hello.
most of the people on here have been sufferers for a long time with this. And I want to say this, Lisa, if I could. I think I'm not happy about COVID. I'm not glad that COVID came around. Obviously, it's just terrible. But what it's done is it's brought light to the Morgellons sufferers. We've been suffering this crap for a long time, and no one's given us the attention. I mean, it has destroyed families. It's destroyed friendships. It's destroyed marriages. It's divided the families. The people that suffer this affliction
Yes.
are out in a 30-acre field with nobody around them. And it's the most devastating affliction that one can endure. Because at least if you have cancer, you have people making you, casseroles, and the church is helping you, and they have cancer support groups, and there's Facebook pages, let's do a GoFundMe, and everyone gathers around you, let's help them. And with Morgellons, it's the complete opposite. My aunt, my uncle, my brother, my sister, they're a bunch of loons. They're lunatics. They're crazy. They don't know what they're doing, and it's disgusting. But they
Self-inflicted. And the self-inflicted.
Yeah, Candy says self-infliction portion where they're trying to say we're doing it to ourselves, which is pathetic. It's a very sorry excuse for what they're doing.
We had a woman on our call. She's from New Jersey, Long Island. And she went to her doctor, and her doctor says, well, you're making these lesions. Well, she had them all over her legs, but she also had them in the middle of the back. And she says to the doctor, well, if I'm making my lesions, how am I making the ones in the middle of my back? I can't reach the middle of my back.
Me too. That happened to me too. Yes. Yes, exactly. And that same exact thing in the middle of my back where my arm could never possibly reach. Totally agree on that. And, many of us, including myself, was sent, into psychiatric evaluation for 3 days, taken away against my will. The police knock on my door. I had no idea what was going on. I'm just as human and normal as everyone else, except for I'm not normal in comparison with them. Thank the Lord for that, though, because we have heart, we have souls, we have minds that we are utilizing, and that's important.
That's right. And if I can go back, Lisa, to the speaking about the frontline doctors, the whistleblowing doctors, these heroines, I will call them, that have come forth to expose the truth about COVID and the jab, the death jab, the truth about what their agenda is, and that this has brought light to the people who have Morgellons. As I said, when you look at many doctors and researchers have brought to light, along with these self-assembling nanotechnology and quantum dots, particulates, it's mixing organic and inorganic. It's just what Scripture says, the mixing of the iron and the clay, as it speaks in Scripture. This is where we're at. We're in a transhuman era. We're living in a world that's never, ever going to go back. If you're James of Andy Griffin, fever and happy days and Laverne and Shirley, those days are over.
Exactly.
They're over. We're all probably old enough on this call to remember those days. And unfortunately, I fear for my grandchild. I fear for my children that they are not going to have the world we grew up in. I mean, at least I had 50 years of a pretty decent life, and now I got to face this garbage. This is a synthetic world we live in. This is there's no food. It's all fake food. You can't trust the vitamin manufacturers. They're tainted. What's really organic? What's not organic? Well, if it's organic and it's in the field, it's being sprayed every day by chemtrails. So what's really organic? I mean, you got to buy something in a hothouse. Now they're burning eggplant. One of our listeners just said earlier before you came on, there was a fire in an eggplant. Well, isn't that interesting? There's shortages of eggs, and they're finding that if you eat eggs every day, good quality eggs, it destroys the spike protein. Well, isn't it interesting that we have an egg shortage now?
Yeah.
So this thing is never ending. It's just mind blowing, but it's bringing the world to light. To maybe we're not as crazy as we thought. Unfortunately, my daughter took the jab because she had to for work.
Yes.
And her second shot, she started becoming symptomatic. So she joined a support group on Facebook, and there's over 2.5 million people. And these people have similar stories as Morgellons, not from the symptom aspect of it, but they're being told by the very doctors that smiled in their face and told them the shot was safe. And now they're seeing these weird, long COVID symptoms, only to be told it's all in your head. Oh, no, it couldn't be from the shot. Oh, no, it's not this, it's not that. And all these other diseases, this stuff brings out dormant diseases that have been in your body, like Epstein-Barr and syphilis, gonorrhea, and all these diseases that lay dormant. Shingles, which is the virus. You know how many people have been getting shingles that received the jab?
Yeah.
Like 80% of the people that got the jab are getting shingles.
You betcha.
So
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Candy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we're pretty much living in the matrix right now. And I think, as I said in our call to everybody in our group, I tell people every day, we're on the Titanic, and we've already struck the iceberg. There's no saving the ship. This world's not savable. We have to save our souls. We got to get that life preserver on. We got to get in that lifeboat, because it's the only hope we have. There is no saving this world. It's only going to get worse, guys. And I'm not trying to be rude. I believe praying is the number one thing to do. We know what Scripture says. We know that it says, as Jesus spoke about the birth pains, he says it's going to get worse every time. With every wave, it's just going to keep getting worse. There's so much in Scripture, in the four Gospels, in Daniel, and Second Timothy, and talking about Revelation, that speak of how bad and perilous times are going to be. So that's pretty much what I have to say about it. But
You are spot on.
Can I add?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
You are spot on. That is spot on. You're right. Go ahead, though, with what you're saying. I'm sorry. Are you there?
I think he keeps jumping in and out a bit, but another thing too I'd like to say is, like, they're putting all this stuff in the movies. They're showing us everything that's happening and everything that's going on, and people just, oh, well, it's just a movie. No, when they make a movie about black goo and fibers coming out of your skin, you know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah.
You itch. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a mess, and
I'm having a hard time hearing Candy speak. Is there a way? Can Candy call my call? It might be clearer for her to speak if she calls.
She's using her cell phone for the podcast.
Yeah. Well, another thing too.
I'm sorry.
I had my cell phone laying down, so the speaker was muffled, so I just picked it up.
Okay, that's
It
much
should be
better.
better.
Okay.
However you're speaking now, it's way clearer.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it should be better now.
And I told everybody about you, and your story is amazing, as Lisa's is as well. And Lisa, I can't thank you enough for all the hard work you did with your YouTube channel and all the videos you put out there. You're a real courageous woman, and you're bold, and I love that about you.
Thank you. I
And
could it without Candy helping with the podcast, though. So without Candy's help on these podcasts, I'd be nothing. We do it because we love you guys. We love us. We understand, and this is the most important dire thing that there is, in my opinion, to educate the public on what is real and what is not. To let them know that just because you have these bigwig names such as Charles E. Holman and many others, and yes, I dropped that name. I did that. That's okay. And I have to say, this is for entertainment purposes only, because I get shadow banned and the algorithm watches everything, and I get my videos removed quite often. But I always put a wink wink after that, because if you're human, you know what I mean. If you're an algorithm, well, you're just not in the spirit or soul, so you won't get it. So thank you, though. I appreciate that. This is dire, guys. This is very important. You have to have a voice. Right, Candy?
Yep. Stand in your own truth.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So
I want to add something to that with the Charles E. Holman. And again, I'm not here to defamate or slander, but I'm going to state the fact. If there's an entity out there that is truly going to help the people, and something is addressed to that entity, and it is in the form of nanotechnology, and it is completely thrown out the door. And I've been saying this for the last 6 years. And lo and behold, 2 years ago, when all this COVID crap started coming out, what is the jab? The jab is absolute, without a doubt, nano in a tube, nano being injected to you. It's already been looked at. It's a lot of the science.
Well, he dropped him again. He keeps dropping in and out. I don't know if y'all can still hear us, but
Sorry?
yeah.
we didn't hear you for a second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you keep dropping like every now and then a few sentences.
And I asked her, I said, Dr. Curie, is there a connection between Morgellons and this COVID jab? And she said, absolutely. She says, but it more or less like Morgellons was the old program, and I think it wasn't going the way they wanted it to go. And this is going to be the direct injection. This is the way they planned it. We had a gentleman on our call for about a year and a half, and he went by the name of X. And he was a whistleblower. He worked for the CDC. He was real. Because I'm going to tell you, gave us more information than anybody we've ever had on the call. I think I could speak for myself, and everybody in our call can agree with this. That man knew about COVID before it happened. 6 months before COVID even hit anywhere in the world, he says there is going to be a pandemic that's going to make Morgellons look like an ant. It's going to be so big, it's going to be worldwide, and millions of people are going to die.
Yeah.
This, honest to God, I kid you not.
I believe it.
Well, honestly, that's one thing that made me decide to go public, because I knew that one day that, more and more people was going to start getting this. And I'm like, you know what? If I sit back and I say nothing, then they're not going to have any idea, just like I was. I had no clue. And it's not fair. If you have something, something, how can you face your children or your grandchildren or anybody if you say nothing? I don't get that. I just don't get that.
Yep.
Absolutely. Now, Candy, do you mind if I ask, now you're the interviewing me, Lisa, but it's kind of a weird call because I wanted you on as my guest, and I'm so appreciative that you want me on as your guest, and this is a wonderful marriage. So I just want to ask, do you mind, Lisa, if I ask Candy a couple of questions?
No, please do. Candy is a poster child for this. I'm telling you, she doesn't like to be called that, but she has been at this for many years. I couldn't think of a better person to speak with.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so
Hey.
Candy, let me ask you, first of all, if you want to tell our group about how, even if you want to be brief and just explain, especially the Bye Blue Sky, because a lot of people don't understand that part. I know that was your friend. If you want to name her name and what that whole thing was about, do you want to explain that real quick?
No, I won't name her name because I think, like I said, she kind of backed off. She got really sick, and I won't put her name out there, but I'll just give them the background on the site. So there was a Facebook group, and they also had a website. It was called byebyebluesky.com. and they were exposing a lot about the the chemical spraying in the skies. And so a lot of people was going out taking pictures. Well, they started like posting billboards up about the spraying that's going on. And, you know, it had their website on there. And, you know, so they were like setting up GoFundMe's, and they were doing these awareness billboards all over the, you know, the United States, and a couple in other countries too as well. So one day, the lady that had the website and was actually the one that was managing the billboards, she contacted me, and she said, look, we want to put up a billboard with somebody's face on it that has Morgellons, and we want to start a GoFundMe, and we want to know if you would be willing to put your face on this billboard about Morgellons. And I was like, absolutely, you know, no doubt. And so, because I kind of got so mad, like I told you before, I'm like proactively pissed off, and I'm like, no, I'm not stopping. You know, I don't care what. So when they asked me to do the billboard, I was like, yeah, absolutely. So they started a GoFundMe, and they raised the money. And I think the billboard went up for like 12 weeks. That it was up in Atlanta, Georgia, right next to the airport. And it was electronic. So at nighttime, it lit up the sky. It was right beside the airport on I-75. And so anyway, so that's what happened with the billboard. And I know that nobody else has ever done a billboard about Morgellons. They were doing them about the chemical spraying and the information about Bye Bye Blue Sky, but that was the one and only ever billboard with Morgellons with my face on it.
Wow. Yeah, because and you know, you're, like I said, you're a real hero doing what you did, because it takes a lot to do that, and to put your name out there, because we've had several people over the last few years on our call that could tell you horror stories of being institutionalized. And Lisa, I know you were as well.
Yes.
And there's nothing worse than, you know, being told that you're delusional, and that you got to be in a straitjacket. And
yeah.
you know, the saddest part about this, guys, is, you know, of course, so we know that all these diseases that I'm going to list here are biological weapons that they made in laboratory, but like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome,
all of that,
Epstein-Barr, Lyme disease, all this stuff was created in a lab.
Gotcha.
But it's interesting that those all got attention, and Morgellons is probably the most provable, because there is actually artifacts, and there is evidence that presents itself that exits the body. And unfortunately, doctors, when I was a little kid, I used to go to my doctor, and he had a microscope on his counter. You go to a doctor now, they outsource everything. You have a microscope. I went to 3 dermatologists when I first had this. Not one, and even the 3rd board certified dermatologist did not have a microscope in their office. I said, you gotta be kidding me. No, you don't.
Let me tell you what I did. Let me tell you what I did. I fixed that for them. I took my laptop and my scope with me. I did my own scope. Took it with me.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up real bad. I can't hear you.
Candy, go ahead, Candy. What did you say?
I was saying that, you know, I understood that before I even went to them. So I took my laptop and my scope with me, my own scope. Put it right on and showed them right there in their office.
Yeah. They hate that. They hate when you tell them how to do it. You give them the stuff, you give them the samples, and they'll say, no, thank you. We'll get our own. You know, that's unfortunately a lot of doctors. You might have come across and got lucky, but most of us on our call haven't had any too good of luck with dermatologists.
No, I actually had to kiss a lot of frogs to get my princes, but you know, I do have really good doctors, but I kissed a lot of toads along the way.
She was amazing, but she also, her vocabulary is very well spoken with it. And she doesn't take no for an answer, which is what none of us should be taking, you know, no for an answer.
Yeah, you just got to be careful, because I know that if you mention the word, we were told by a few people in our calls that if you mention the word Morgellons, they'll put you are automatically now red tag.
Yep, and that's a no-no. That's right.
Well, so far I've mentioned it to two of my regular doctors, and just recently my lung collapsed and I was in the hospital for 12 days. And while I was in the hospital, I actually was able to talk to several nurses and several doctors about it. And, you know, I mean, I get them. I don't even know how, by the grace of God alone. I'm fearless, you know, and I don't show any emotion. I just, you know, prove my case. And it's like they listen. I don't get it, you know, I don't get it. They listen to me. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to go with this and, you know, trust and have faith in God that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's all we can do.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, we're going to fight because we're warriors.
Absolutely. And Lisa, how long have you been dealing with the symptoms? I mean, I know that we all have this in us, but
So when I look back,
I want to ask.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When I look back,
Oh, go ahead.
I think probably with all of you too, if I'm not mistaken, I think we've all had this probably much longer than we actually realized, or at least this is seemingly so with many that I speak with. I myself first recognized that something was different or wrong back in, I guess, maybe 2013 and 14, but then I wrote it off as, you know, maybe everything's okay and I'm just mistaken. In 2015, full-fledged, everything just kind of came back drastically. What I was seeing before and some that you couldn't possibly explain on any level, you know, as far as my mind was concerned. It was a horrific sci-fi movie is the only way I can explain it. And it's almost like it's a trigger reaction. People immediately shut down, close the ears, close the eyes, and doctors, medical facilities included, everybody in your little world will not, they refuse to look, they refuse to acknowledge or give it any thought. And to me, there's something bigger to this picture because we all have similar stories that our families, all of a sudden they're just, you know, a family one day. And yes, some have had, you know, hard childhoods, such as Candy. But I mean, I myself was raised in a loving, good, wonderful Christian family. You know, things aren't perfect at all for anyone. So I'm not trying to put an icing on the cake here. But what I'm telling you is for my family to completely turn their backs and completely just say, she's crazy, take her away. And nobody called to check on me while I was in there. I didn't know who had my little girl at the time. And she was very young at the time. And I'm a single parent raising her. And I just get hauled away with no explanation. Keep in mind, this is seemingly the story for so many, if not even more than so many individuals that have this affliction. Again, I won't call it a disease either because I refuse to believe that it is that. But there's something else going on because it could be a coincidence, possibly, if maybe one other person was having these experiences, or maybe say five people having these experiences with their families, walking away, and the doctor's like delusional parasitosis, like immediately without even looking at you. Or, I mean, some of us don't even have to say the word Morgellons. It's almost like there's something in the form of an AI, an operating system, possibly and potentially going on inside the human form in everyone. And this is just a thought, and don't condemn me for it. This is my thoughts. What are the chances that everybody that I know of, almost like clockwork, experience the turning of backs, the family turning away, the doctors refusing to look, people literally, like I had friends, tons of friends, and they run away, they disappear. Everybody in your world disappears. You find yourself completely alone. To me, this is no coincidence. There is something much bigger, much larger. And in my opinion, Morgellons is just the tiniest, little teeny portion of a much, much larger puzzle. And it's so much bigger than this.
I'd like to say something about that. So, Lisa talking about people turning away and all. So when I was younger and I was being abused, and I told on my father for that, it was like everybody said, oh, she's just making that up. She's just trying to get attention. That didn't happen. And so my mind and my psyche was already adapted to those denials. And so then even when I got older and I started getting sick, you know, I started having all these problems and everything, and they're like, you know, I'm going to the doctors and I'm trying to tell the doctors, and they're like, oh, you're causing your own problems. You're doing this to yourself. So not even knowing anything about Morgellons at that point, I just was having a lot of medical problems, and finally got a doctor that he did diagnose me with lupus, but it turned out to be, they call it undifferentiated connective tissue disorder, because I have so many autoimmune diagnoses. So, but even then, trying to get that diagnosis, I was denied all those years, and talked down to and treated badly, you know, and even people, it's like, oh, well, she's sick again. She's always sick, you know, so I was used to that. So when I decided to go public with Morgellons, and, you know, I told my family, they were like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, yes, I can do that. And I'm going to do that. And so, you know, so what I did, even though I didn't have the support of my family, I started like talking to total strangers in the store, just regular acquaintances, that just everyday people that I come in contact with. And there was like this select few people that I wasn't even family, just people, what couple of them I just met for the very first time. And they were like, I believe you. And it gave me strength and it gave me courage. But if I hadn't have talked about it, I would have never got any support from anybody, is what I'm saying. Because those are the people, the ones that didn't have it and were not my family. Those were the ones that supported me and was there for me. So if I hadn't have spoken up and told
You
you,
have to have a voice.
I would have never had anything.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Broke up.
No, I'm saying I would have never had any support if I hadn't talked to total strangers and just everyday people that I just occasionally come in contact with. And a lot of them, we became very, very good friends.
It's amazing. Perfect strangers over your own world of individuals that used to be close. Isn't it crazy how that works?
Tell them about the trip to get the peppermint oil that night, Lisa.
Part of the problem is the fact that the doctors, I think, and I agree with you, Lisa, wholeheartedly. There's a much bigger picture to this. But I will say this: if the medical community acknowledged this, and I'm going to tell you guys a real quick story. I'm no longer married, but my wife, at the time, when I met my wife, her mother was a single mom. Her mom was, and I used to think that the mom was lazy, because my wife had a younger 10-year-old brother that felt sorry for him, because he, you know, his mom would come home from work and she would lock herself in her room and she would just shut the lights off. She had her windows blacked out and she says, you guys got to keep quiet. I have to sleep. Well, she worked full time. And I used to think she's just a terrible mother. She doesn't care about her kids, blah, 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 whatever. Well, here I found out about 6 months later that she was suffering from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. She had unbelievable body aches, extreme fatigue, horrible headaches. I mean, we're talking, you know, major headaches to where she said she felt like her head was going to explode.
Yes,
And
my mom
she,
too.
for years and years was just, you know, fighting this and going to a naturopath in Michigan. She was driving 5 hours from the Chicago area to Detroit, Michigan to go see a specialist. And finally, in the early 1990s, they acknowledged chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. The CDC accepted it as a real disease. They started treating it. They were medically coding it. And it was like, hurrah, hurrah. Finally, it last, because Big Pharma got their hands on it so they could start making poisonous drugs to treat people.
Exactly.
So they got their way. And it was like a, she said it was like a 50-ton weight lifted off, because all these people, her old boss, they fired her.
Yep.
And her old boss called her and cried and said, I am so sorry that I never listened to you. You see, I think the biggest issue with this is just the ignoring and the not understanding and the rejection from the medical community. Because can you imagine if you brought your kid to the doctor and the doctor came out and said, excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I would like to speak with, or I would like to speak to you children. This is your mom here? Yes. Your mother has nanotech. She has nano, and she has nano poisoning in her body. It's called Morgellons disease. Your mom is not crazy. We really don't know what it is. We don't really know how to treat it. We're going to do everything we can for your mother. She needs love and support. I guarantee you, it would be a whole different mantra. But that will never happen.
Right.
It will not happen with this, because this affliction is the end game. What you're seeing,
You betcha.
Yeah, because somebody would be held accountable for all the crap that they're putting in our food supply. So they're never going to admit it. And even if they do actually ever get a diagnosis code for it, guess what? They're going to be treating you with some kind of drugs that's going to make it even worse or kill you, or like the long-term antibiotics intravenously. I'm not doing that. You know?
These are heavy metals that are, being dropped on us and causing all sorts of things. It's just,
I would like to ask you, Lisa, as far as because you have a lot of interesting videos on your YouTube channel, I wanted to ask you about the chemtrail spraying. We're going to have a gentleman come on here shortly. If you guys would like to have him be part of your podcast, he's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Virginia, he knows about HAARP. He's very familiar with Morgellons. And he's going to be interesting to hear. But the chemtrail spraying is really, really something that's another huge cover-up that the so-called tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists have been talking about for 35 to 40 years. We know that they're real. I've been on this earth long enough.
Anyone that can look up.
A long time in the Air Force to tell you that this is not normal. I know about jet fuel. I was a mechanic in the Air Force. It's JP4 is what they call jet fuel in the military. It's refined kerosene. It's no different than what the commercial airlines use.
Yeah.
And
I got a video of it today.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but because we're on this subject, I have a video that I put on my YouTube channel earlier today, that, if you go to Waking God's Child YouTube channel, it'll be the video right under this one of also the solar simulator. And like directly after that, plane going back and forth. And again, it's hard. I zoom in. I'm a private investigator, for those who don't know. So my job for a living is to be very observant. So I don't take anything lightly, and I'm very attentive to all things around me. So with that said, of course, the first thing I notice is that there's starting to be these funky looking lines in the sky, as usual, that are just look like a rocket went straight to the moon, but leaves the con trail, which I call a con artist trail, because anyone in their right mind knows that if it's a contrail, it evaporates, because that means it's water based. It's going to be evaporating quite quickly. So, I don't know where I immediately get that fact check little box under anything on my social media when I post about these things, or I get my content removed. But what I'm here to tell you is, if you people see that they put that little box under a post, that pretty much means they feel very threatened by you, because if someone's telling you how to make a banana pudding recipe, they don't get a box underneath that says, well, actually, that's not the correct recipe, correct? So, it's a threat to them. And our human rights have been totally taken away from us. But like I said, it is on there, and you need to take a look at it. I haven't posted or uploaded the one with the plane. That's next. But my priority tonight was to come on here, as I promised, with Miss Candy, my little bestie there, and speak with you great people. And I'm just so happy to be here. And I want to thank you again, Mark.
Well, I want to thank you too, and I'm sure there's a lot of people on your podcast that are watching and listening.
Yeah, quite a
and
few.
do I have your permission to give out the call number?
Please do. Yes.
Okay, so if the people there that follow Lisa and Candy, if you want to join an actual telephone conversation every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central Time, this call's been going on for about 5 years, and I will bring guests on periodically, and we formed a family. I'm sure, as you have, Lisa, we have a family. I think what's really neat about having a phone conversation is that it's you can put not necessarily we don't have faces. A lot of us don't know what we look like. Maybe that's a good thing, right? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for me, maybe I shouldn't have mine on here.
Well, we're all on here, and we formed a family. I mean, we have
Amen.
conversations. We'll talk serious the first couple 2 hours or whatever. And you don't have to, you can come on and get off whenever you want. We've had the call go as late as 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it goes that long for anyone who wants to stay on. I don't stay on that long. I actually try to go to sleep by midnight, because if I stay up that late, I'm trashed the next day.
I'm too old for that, right?
We're like a family. We share recipes. We talk about other world events. We talk about the demons in this world. We talk about the COVID. We talk about a lot of stuff pertaining. We share recipes. We share protocols. I mean, this is a great place to come if you want to talk. Hey, you know, what works? I got these lesions in my scalp, and I guarantee you there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to tell you what they've done for their scalp. And the old saying is, many hands make light work, and there's power in numbers, and if we join together, you guys, we can really be successful. So let me get the call number out. It's area code 605-313-5111. So it's 5111. And then you're going to have to put an access code in, and that access code is 717764, and the hashtag or pound symbol. And then it will say, please announce yourself. You don't have to announce yourself.
Would you repeat the phone number again? Just repeat the phone number one more time.
If you want to introduce yourself and get in. We have people from all over the country. We have Canadians. We have a gentleman from England for a while. We have people from all over, mostly the continental United States and some Canadians. That's pretty much what we hear. We're pretty much on the North American continent. So,
Gotcha.
Thank you for letting me put that number out there.
Yeah, can you repeat the number one more time, just in case they didn't catch that? And I know that they can pause and rewind,
one
but...
more time. Okay, 605-313-5111. Access code 717764 pound or hashtag.
Perfect.
Yeah, Lisa, you can probably type that in a comment.
That's what I'm getting ready to do. That's why I had to repeat it. So.
Okay.
And actually, Candy, I think you can comment too. Does it allow you to?
I think so, but I've got it on full screen right now. So let me.
Okay. Well, I will be typing that into the comments here, people. And thank you, Mark, for sharing that with everyone. I do recommend that everyone go and check, his podcast out, his call in. They so far, I think they're dead on. You know, they're definitely aiming high there, and they've got it figured out for what we can figure out thus far. So thank you again, Mark.
No, thank you so much. And can I ask Lisa, if there's anybody that wants to, on our call, that would want to ask you any questions, do you have a couple minutes to take a couple questions?
Sure, absolutely. And Candy too. So we're both still here.
Yeah, absolutely, for both of you. Is there anybody on here? Now, come on, guys, don't be shy. Is there anybody who wants to ask these two ladies something? Now, Candy's been suffering this for nearly 30 years. So if anybody, this woman's come full circle. She's feeling her life. Yep, go ahead, Michelle.
I do. I would like to know exactly what their symptoms are, what they are suffering from, because so many of us have different ones, right? So can you elaborate on that?
Is that for Candy or me, Lisa? Which?
For both of you.
Okay.
Do you want me to go first? You want me to go first?
Yes, ma'am. You can go first.
Okay, so my symptoms started out where I'd get like an occasional chunk of skin missing, or I'd get a little rash, or I'd itch, and then it'd go away, and or like in my panty liner, I would find fibers in there, or I'd blow my nose and I'd see fibers in the tissue, but didn't really have any major symptoms. I had some like ringing in my ears stuff, and then sometimes I'd have stuff to get in my eyes, and everything was just coming and going for many, many years. And so then it got to where the lesions started getting like really big and more of them. And I got the crawling, biting sensation up underneath my skin on my face. And I didn't even say anything to my husband for the longest time. And so he came up behind me one night and went to go put his arms around me, and I jumped and I screamed. He's like, "What is the matter with you?" And he's like, "You don't love me anymore?" It's like, "No, that's not it." It's like, you got to sit down. And I told him all the symptoms I was feeling, and I didn't even know what it was then. And so progressively it just got worse and worse. And one of the lesions I had on this arm over here it covered my entire arm. It was as big around as a tennis ball. And it was probably 1/4 of an inch thick on the top of my skin and 1/4 of an inch under my skin. And I had surgery on that one 7 times, and it still came back. I had surgery on both my arms and my right leg all at the same time. The last major surgery I had, they admitted me in the hospital because the lesions on my legs were so bad. They were all the way down to the bone, and they had to put a wound back on my leg. So both my arms was wrapped, my leg was wrapped. They had to take skin from my thigh to replace the skin on my shin bones because it was so deep, and they still came back. So after that, I was like, okay, y'all not cutting me no more. I'm going to figure this out. And actually what happened with me was I got up to go to the doctor one day. I'd had my doctor for 13 years. And I went outside, and there was like cobwebs were everywhere, all over the trees and everything. The skies was saturated. I'm taking pictures before I even went to the doctor. So I went into the room, and the nurse comes in, and she's like, "Oh, will you be getting a flu shot today?" And I was like, "Hell no!" And I'm never unpleasant. And I was just angry. And I said, "Hell no." She's like, "Well, I know what you mean." She's like, and we started talking, and I showed her the pictures that I had taken that morning before I left the house. So she grabs her phone and she starts showing me one she had taken. And so anyway, we became Facebook friends. The nurse, this was years and years ago. And so a couple days later, she sent me a Facebook message, and she said, "Have you ever heard of Morgellons?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And she said, "Look up Morgellons and chemtrails." And when I did, and I started looking at those symptoms, I was like, oh my God. So if that hadn't been for her, I don't know if I would have ever really known, or I would have had a much harder path to follow in order to get to knowing. And knowing is half the battle, really. It is the battle, okay? Because if you don't know, then how are you going to fix it, So, that's how I found out about Morgellons. And I was angry at her. I messaged her a couple days later. I said, you knew about this all these years, and you're just now telling me after all the crap I went through and all the surgeries and everything? She said, "I swear to you," she said, "I didn't know." She said, "I started thinking about your symptoms, and I started researching, and I found it." And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, I was angry at her because I thought she already knew, but she didn't. She actually went home and researched it herself and found it. So that's how I found out about it.
What state was that in?
Right?
Sandy, what state do you live in?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, wow.
Is this Belinda or is this Angie?
Oh, it's Belinda. I'm sorry.
Oh, hi, Belinda. Okay, yeah. So wait, Michelle, I just want Michelle to finish because she asked the question. Did Lisa want a rebuttal on your?
Yeah, I would like to hear what Lisa has to say too, because if you remember correctly, Mark, Joanne from New York had probably the worst case of lesions that we've seen, and yet her dermatologist managed to clear them all up with, what was it, the
minocycline and an antifungal cream. Yeah, that's great you brought that up, Michelle.
And an antibiotic, which is, oh gosh.
Right, minocycline. Minocycline. It's a form of the tetracycline family. That's what I said.
But that was the pill that she took. But I'm
right,
talking
right.
about, she was taking an antibiotic with an antifungal cream. Gentamicin, thank you, Dawn. And over the course of a year, every lesion cleared up. Now, she is still taking the antibiotic or whatever it's called, Mark. So, it just depends.
Well, I mean, let me interrupt for 1 second. I forgot to tell you about this part too. With me, I had like gobs and gobs and gobs of fibers that just poured out of my leg and my arm. I mean, it was horrific. And I got videos of it. So, I mean, I had like 4-inch long fibers, just gobs and bundles of them that poured out of my leg. And so what I've actually got all mine healed, except for the only thing left I'm working on is my face right now. But everything else is healed, and I had massive lesions over 90% of my body.
And how did you get that out? Yeah.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, she broke up on me.
She said, how did you heal it?
Oh, I started like, well, honestly, I prayed, and I was like, I begged God. I was like, you got to tell me what to do because I can't do this anymore. I just wasn't going to let them cut me anymore. I wasn't letting them inject me. No more biopsies. I wasn't doing anything. So, you know, the next thing you know, I started hearing fight fire with fire. So I started going and looking for everything that was hot, and I found out that everything that was working to help me had camphor, CAMPHOR in it. And I started putting stuff with camphor on it, and it was drawing them up and, you know, like drawing them to the surface, and I was able to debris stuff, and it also kills infection. So, and then some of them, after I got all those fibers out of my leg, I had big, like golf ball sized knots up underneath my leg, and I deep tissued massaged those with camphor oil. And then all the lesions surfaced, like tons of lesions all over my leg, massive ones. And so then a friend of mine that lives in Australia, I think, she sent me her homemade black drawing salve, which is nothing but herbs and roots. And I started using that, which was a very painful process. And even like on my leg, when I would put it down at the bottom of my leg, I could feel the fibers pull from all the way up to my hip. And one time it was pulling around my ankle. I thought it was just going to cut my ankle into, you know, detach it from my leg, my ankle and my foot, you know. And I was like, oh, it's just awful. But so it took me quite a few years. But yeah, everything's all clear now. Other than my face, I'm still working on that.
Can you and how to get it?
I'm sorry?
Black salve.
We,
You said you took some product was called black from Australia.
It's called black salve. It's a black drawing salve. It's
black drawing salve.
Yeah, they had a YouTube channel out on it. It's One Answer to Cancer: How to Make Black Drawing Salve with the herbs, and it was out on YouTube for years, but they took it down. But fortunately, I wrote the recipe down before it actually disappeared. So I manually wrote the recipe down. So I still have that. And then to get the herbs that goes into it, you have to go to plantessentials.com. And the 4 herbs that they use, which is graviola, chaparral, galangia, and bloodroot. And they come in a 100-gram bag, and each one has 25 grams, so it's pre-mixed.
Recipe to Mark.
Sandy, you can actually leave a comment with the recipe that you just gave on the channel in the comments.
Well, I don't know if that's going to wind up causing you a problem with your YouTube, Lisa, because like I said, they took it down. You know, it's gone off the internet.
Did. Well, you can always rewind the video and listen to it again.
Or I can take a picture of it later and I'll text it to Mark, and then he can text it to whoever he wants to.
You could forward it. You can send it to my email too. Lisa's got my email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
But it's a very brutal process, and I have people all the time telling me, oh, can you send me some of that? No, not until you educate yourself on how to use it. So because the process is very brutal, and very painful, and if you put that stuff on your leg or on your skin, it starts pulling like everything into the one location wherever you put it at. And it's a process. Sometimes if it's small, it'll collect it all within 4 or 5 days and it'll pop out. Other ones that I had that were big, I mean, one of them, the stuff did not like release for probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks. And it's very painful. So again, you know, you need to educate yourself on how to use it, because if you put it on there and you start going through pain and you're like, oh, I'm going to go to the doctor. Well, guess what? You put that stuff on your skin, they will commit you then, you know? So if you're going to put it on, you got to be able to, willing to suck it up and see it through the bitter end without going to the ER or the doctor. That's why I just don't give it to people. You know what I mean? I'll give you the recipe, but I'm not responsible for what you make, you know, or how you apply it. But you do need to educate yourself on it if you're going to use it.
Can I add something?
And can you say again, it was rhodiola, and then you said candula or something, and glandula, and another thing. What?
Like I said, I'll take a picture of it and send it to Mark, and then he can send it to you.
Well, let's do this, Mary. Let's do this, Mary, because we have a lot of people that want to ask questions, and everyone's jumping on here. I want Michelle's question to be answered, and then whoever else. I know Belinda's next. Mary, so just hold tight for a second. I'm not trying to be rude, but I know there's a lot of you that want to ask questions, and I don't know how long you ladies want to stay on. Maybe what we'll do is I'll get the whole thing. I'll have Lisa email me Candy's recipe if she's willing to do that, and then I can forward it to you, Mary. We could do it that way.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, all right. Did that answer your question, Lisa? Did you want to quickly tell Michelle about that? Because I know we have other people that want to ask some questions. So go ahead, Lisa. If you want
I was just going to add that. Yeah, sorry. So Candy and I have both been using this new product. It's $40. You can find it online. And this gentleman that came up with this, it's called Altuo, Altuo. It is a mold detox. But the story behind him and his young daughter at the time, they were both suffering with kind of these symptoms to some respect. And one day he pulled his couch out from the wall, and on the back of the wall, it was just full of black mold. So his young daughter, I think she was like 5 at the time or so, very young, she became extremely ill. He became extremely ill. But he got, you know, his symptoms weren't as bad as hers. He got them a little bit less severe. This young child was so ill, and he was a single parent, and I can relate because I'm a single parent. He was desperate to find something, anything that would help this child, you know, and our children are our lives. Like, you know, ours don't even matter. When you have children, like, your life is nothing compared to that, right? So he went on this mission to seek out, you know, all Chinese herbalists and healers, and what he came up with was this, and it's the Alturo, and it's mold detox. And on his website, if you just Google or type in molddtx.com, it'll bring you directly to his page. This stuff, like your biofilm and all the debris within you, will come off. Like, you will see results almost immediately. But this will go on, like, I'm on my 3rd week. I think Candy's on, well, no, I'm almost on my 3rd week. Candy is on her 3rd week.
I'm on my 4th. I'm on my 4th week.
Okay, so I'm almost on my 4th week then, because I am a few days behind Candy. So long story short, Candy, look at, I mean, her face has come, and if you guys get a chance to get on my YouTube channel later to look, you will see, because her face is on there, and as is mine. Her face has come just full circle. And my whole body, you know, has always been horribly afflicted with this. My neck was such a problem. And it just draws out this, you know, all the black seedling type things, the hard granules. Anyone that says there's no, you know, parasite to this, I'm sorry, but there is. There is also that in this. I learned to never say never with this affliction, because come to find out, pretty much anything and everything is possible, and the rabbit hole goes very deep. You know, mine started with the Brazos River. I was looking for artifacts, and I love archaeology and geographical type things. And I was looking, you know, down there, and I came in contact with what I believe to be now that I've researched, maybe a black tarry substance, also known as black goo. However, with that said, it doesn't mean that that's where it came from, but it might have been the trigger moment for me, because I immediately started having the fibers. I watched a fiber literally as I was soaking down the rocks / artifacts, a fiber literally lunged itself into my toe. As crazy as that sounds, that was my first occurrence of like, oh my gosh, something is so wrong. And I watched this, and I mean, I screamed in horror. I didn't feel any pain, but from that moment on, my life became progressively worse, and the lesions just started erupting all over my body. And if I could offer any advice at all to anyone, as much as we want these out, and by gosh, they shouldn't be there. I don't care if I got a Thanksgiving turkey in my body, like it shouldn't be there. And this is what I told the doctor when he said, yeah, I see that, but there's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, my gosh, you know what? I don't care if I have a Thanksgiving turkey, a freaking beetle bug, or anything, like anything that's in my body, it should not be there. I'm going to remove it with tweezers, right? Well, the thing is, tweezers, please, if you can at all, refrain from using the tweezers. The tweezers will leave marks and scarring when you take yourself into any medical facility. They are going to look and they're going to think self-inflicted. Now, here's another little funny fact. Even when I didn't use tweezers at all to remove these little bastards, is what I like to call them, they still said the same thing. So it's irrelevant. But save your beautiful skin, because you do have beautiful skin under there. Do not use the tweezers. There are easier and more gentle ways to remove these. And it can come simply by, pinching softly and squeezing and then pulling upward into the surface level. Now, there's billions of them. We know this, but there are ways to ease the symptoms. And again, borax, of course, but this Altuo this is a game changer right here, guys. It is Altuo, or Altuo, Altuo. I'm going to say it one more time. And you can find it on molddetox.com. It's MOLDDTX. So there's no E in there, .com. It's $40. This jar of it will last you a long time.
And it only takes a little tiny bit. I only put a couple drops on my fingers and do one side of my face, and then a couple drops on the other side and do the other side.
Changer. I mean, I am shedding more debris now than I ever did. I'm almost done with doing so. But, if it wasn't for all the little things in between that you do, and protocols are good, and you got to change it up. These things they're very intelligent. They get immune. After so long, they develop immunities or just an awareness of what you're using. So keep them on their toes.
Thank you, Lisa, for saying that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we've been saying that on our call for years, that something works for a little while, and then you gotta keep them on their toes. You gotta switch it up, because these things have an intelligence.
You got to learn how to be the trickster, because that is dire. They do. It's an AI operating system, as far as I'm concerned, and there is a supernatural, spiritual side to it as well, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely, and I concur with you 100%. I want to ask. I know there's some other people want to ask. I'm gonna let you get. I just want to say one thing real quick. This is kind of important. I'm glad you brought up. You said that there's a parasite side to this.
There is, yes.
I will say this. I'm not going to say his name because we all know who he is. He's a shill. He's a snake oil salesman.
I'll say his name.
A number of years. Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's a Jeremy, somebody.
People's money, but he loves Columbola has made this man very, very wealthy. Columbola is his best friend. It's a two-segmented hexapod, the oldest insect known on Earth. It's even older than the cockroach. Okay? It is an insect. Yeah. It has 6 legs, but only has 2 segments. Most insects have 3 segments. This thing's 2, but it has 6 legs. It's called a springtail. Okay? Now, I've seen it in my house, not here. I used to live out in the country. I had them in my pink. They never touched me. But they are a soil-dwelling organism that loves to eat fungus. And we know, everybody in this call and on this podcast knows, there's a huge fungal component to Morgellons. Yes. Okay? Along with everything else. It's a cocktail. It's a gigantic cocktail of bacteria and viruses and funguses and AI and nano and organic, and you know that.
You know what? I call it the toxic soup mix of the day.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The toxic soup mix of the day.
It's ever changing. Toxic soup mix of the day, she said. It's ever changing. It evolves constantly.
Okay. She's hard to hear right now. So what I'm saying to everybody is that this, what is your view, Lisa, on the parasite part of this? Because there are several people on this call that absolutely poo-poo the idea that there could possibly be a bug living in somebody.
100%. I've had all of the symptoms. So I've had everything from the fibers to the parasitic type. And I'm not talking about when the fibers bundle up and they resemble a bug. And they do. We know that happens. As odd as that sounds, you know, those fibers can pretty much, you know, crinkle their little bodies up and become whatever they want.
Well, and I would like to say something about that too, because I talked with Mark about the article from Dietrich Klinghardt, and it's called "The Life-Saving Work of Parasites and Nano." Let's see, aluminum nano and the life-saving work of parasites by Dietrich Klinghardt, and he tells you in there, which everybody has parasites. Okay, everybody has them. So whether you're healthy or unhealthy, you still have parasites in your body. I think the difference with us is they're being genetically modified.
There you go. That's where I was going with that. Exactly. There's a genetic modification to these. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was going to say next.
Do you think that there is actually, like, people think they actually have like a scabies mite or you know, they'll have a mite that's you know, because if you go on Facebook and
everyone has to wonder that at first, right? I'm sorry?
I don't know, I was breaking up. I'm sorry. Let me just say this before I don't want to offend anybody, and I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm simply, for the sake of argument, there are mite sites on Facebook group. Okay, I've never been part of Facebook group.
They're not mine.
But I have friends who are. I have people on our call that are part of these mite groups. Okay, there are people who are living an absolute nightmare who don't think they have Morgellons, and they think it's all mites.
Yeah, no, they have Morgellons.
Straw mites, they have rodent mites, they have bird mites. They can't get rid of them. They fumigate their houses. They have proof. They pull these mites out. They take them to entomologists. They get skin. There are instances where people are infested with mites. But I want to go down the Morgellons highway. Is there people that have Morgellons that actually could have a mite infestation time? Or are we talking about a synthetically, genetically modified creature? Because we had Exxon from the CDC, and he said that they are genetically making creatures that are not even known to humans, that are festering in people. People's bodies will produce.
I have produced things that are not normal.
Right. And another thing too is when you take the DNA of other living organisms and you put it in the food supply and in the air and people are eating it, and then you add a little nanotechnology to it, you're creating new life forms. So some of the things we have coming out of us, like the fibers, you know, like they're bundled up and it looks like a bird or it looks like a dog. I had one that came out of my head that looked like a monkfish. I didn't even know what a damn monkfish was.
That's where I was going next with that. I had a hydra, an actual hydra come from my body, my neck area 5 years ago, and did not know what it was at the time. But when Dr. Carrie Madej came out on the Stu Peters show and showed what she was finding in the roller up your sleeve, but don't do it, I literally was dumbstruck because it was identical, spitting image. And this thing was about the size of half of my pinky fingernail. And I sent it to you, Mark. You saw that. And I mean, it's just.
I saw it, and that thing is freaky, of a circus freak thing I've ever seen. And that came out of your body.
And there you go. It came out of my neck. And and there's nothing on earth that lives like that. It looks like that.
And
I didn't have to have a microscope. I zoomed in, and again, it was half the size of my pinky nail. Now, I don't know if you all that's like on the call, you can't see, but my neck area, it has been hell, and it is these things can squeeze right through those lesions. There is no size, and I want to settle that right now. There is no specifications to size. I just throw that thought right out the window, because there is no right way or wrong way. Anything, when I say this, anything and everything is possible. I mean that from the depths of my heart. When I tell you that, you know, I had a friend that came on and she had pulled this massive fiber out that it looked like yarn that she had cut off about 4 inches, right? It looked and appeared that way, but she did not. She had pulled it from her body, and I can't tell you how many people came on, and it was on a Facebook group. I will not say which one, but they attacked her relentlessly and just horribly attacked her, saying that could not have possibly. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, I defended her right then and there because I have had the exact same thing. These things they're compressed. You got to remember, they are compressed within the body. When they hit the air, when they hit your oxygen, the air, they're going to expand and be all the realness that you ever dreamed of and more. I mean, it's that simple and that complicated.
And if none of y'all have experienced this, I've actually had bloodworms I pulled out of my nose, and probably 4 or 5 inches long. And one of them, like I said, I thought it was a blood clot because I could feel it crawling up in my sinus cavity. And I was like, I blew real hard, and then I started pulling it. And like I said, it was about 4 or 5 inches long. It was longer than my lighter. And then I took a toothpick and I started separating it. And it was like, it looked like a feather as I was separating. I took a picture of it, and I'm like, you know, it was like a blood feather thing. And it was just disgusting.
But I had another guy that was going to come on and join us. I feel terrible. I'm just looking at the clock. And his name is Seth. Seth, are you on the call by any chance? Seth, are you on here? Okay. Yeah, so he's on.
He's there.
You are. Seth, I am so sorry. I feel terrible because you were going to come on and talk about HAARP and 5G and the Morgellons. Do you mind just standing fast for a few minutes and just let us finish this up, and then I'll introduce you?
I just can't wait to hear him.
I am so sorry, Seth. Guys, I'm gonna let me just do this real quick because this is the first time, and maybe we can do this again too, Lisa.
No worries on our end.
Here for us. But I want to see this, guys. This whole thing, the things morph, and for people that don't have this affliction, they have no clue what we're seeing, what we're dealing with, and there is something so negative. We had people on our call that that would walk through a room and they could dim a light. They could dim light bulbs. They would touch electricity. They could turn lights on. They could turn it off. Their body was electric. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
That's true. I did all of that.
This is the weirdest stuff. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That is so very true. And all of those occurrences have happened to me. I used to drain a car battery. But with Seth coming on, I'm interested to hear because I have been, I am very much, pretty much involved in every way trying to thrust my body and heart and soul into figuring this out, and frequencies, vibrational frequencies, and everything that HAARP is doing as well. This all is super interconnected and is very, very relevant. So I'm going to be quiet from here on out because I want to hear him talk because I've dove in deep there as well. And I think that this is something everyone should listen to.
Absolutely. So if that's okay, guys, we'll get back to Lisa and her in a few minutes. But let's bring Seth on. Seth, I'm not going to give you your last name. You want to stay private or whatever, that's up to you. If you just want to, I know you're a self-taught gentleman, but you have an extreme knowledge, it sounds like, with HAARP and you understand Morgellons. And Virginia, are you on the call by any chance, Virginia?
Yes.
Okay, guys, Virginia, do I have your permission to give your name out?
That's fine.
Okay. This is Virginia Farmer, everybody. This is the woman who has fought the fight of her life to save her son's dignity because he was murdered by the hands of a 5G cell tower. Well, 5G, it's a cell tower, a military weapon that stood outside of San Diego State University, and you won a class action lawsuit. Virginia is, if it wasn't for Virginia, everybody, we would not be here. Our call would not exist. This woman has brought wonderful guests. Your knowledge itself, Virginia. You were in the movie, I believe it was, what was the movie called? It was Take Back Your Power. Take Back Your Power. Virginia's got great credentials. She's hosted on the Randy Yarbrough show, and she's done other, podcasts. She's got great credibility. She's got great connections to people in high places. And she just lost her husband not too long ago. She lost her son to glioblastoma, brain cancer. And Virginia, real quick, because we're going to get to you, Steph. I just wanted to tie these two together because Virginia brought me Steph today, so I had to introduce Virginia. Virginia, your son, how many more people other than your son had gotten cancer at that dormitory?
Well, I got a professor contacted me in the end of 2021 and gave me a list of 9 more women who have passed away, and then I actually found a new boy that died from glioblastoma, brain cancer as well, that was on campus. So, without having a registry for brain tumors, it's really hard to find some of this stuff, but I keep a close eye on it.
Well, and you've just been in the fight. Virginia's got a lot of credentials, you guys. This is a beautiful woman inside and out, and she's been through hell, as all of us have. But this woman is like you, Candy. She's put her face out there. She's put her story out there, and she suffers the repercussions. Trust me. And Virginia just brought the Seth on. So if I can, Virginia, I'm gonna switch over to Seth real quick. If people want to, Virginia's story, she can tell that to you too. But Seth, go ahead and explain yourself if you want, and just tell us what you know.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And yeah, the first disclaimer here, I'm not any sort of expert on HAARP. I was just pursuing that as an angle of investigation based on some other kind of threads I'd connected earlier, and corresponding with Virginia had caused me to revisit it. The last time I had looked into HAARP was probably 10 years ago, and then I heard it had allegedly since closed down, and it was old news, but it turns back it was actually rebooted and switched from analog to digital and whatever. We can get into that story later. But I came across Virginia. I'd heard about the story of the tragic death of her son and her fight against campus years ago, and I can't remember exactly how I stumbled back on it. It was probably 3 or 4 months ago, but I emailed Virginia and just said, I tracked down some contact information and said, hey, whatever happened with that lawsuit, did you end up winning it? So we've been corresponding over email for the past several months, and that's just led to me being invited to participate on this call tonight. Virginia had mentioned that the HP REN system, which is a high bandwidth wireless tower, the core of which in San Diego County is located on top of the buildings at SDSU, was also connected to HAARP. And so I started looking into that, and I just as sort of a synergistic coincidence, another friend of mine who's in a research group that's kind of sharing information about the Internet of Bodies technology and nano-brain-machine interfaces and things like that, had sent me a 2018 video from Dana Ashley, who's a YouTuber. And in this, the video was like some clickbaity title about how to do this one thing to protect yourself from Morgellons or something. But in it, the guest makes a mention that he thinks that HAARP might be used as a quote-unquote carrier frequency to help direct some of this self-decepting synthetic biology technology. And I stumbled across this. I was, I'd known about, I've been aware of chemtrails as being a thing since 2012. And of course, I'd come across Clifford Carnet's and seen the videos of the fibers floating in the air and him talking about the red blood cells in them and everything. And it just, at the time, it just seemed too fantastic to really know what to make of it and what to do with it. But fast forward 10 years, at least from when I discovered it, and all of the craziness with the pandemic, scandemic, and then the information coming out from La Quinta Columna and other researchers around the world that actually started putting the contents of these, I call them bioweapons disguised as vaccines or toxins or COVID mystery, certain in there, but I will never call them a vaccine. It was shocking to me that they were finding graphene oxide and looks like irregular, like non-natural structures that were inside the shot, and structures that actually appear to be self-assembling and forming under the microscope, along with various other things like Dr. Young is claimed to have found parasites and other impurities in the shots. But strangely, a lot of people are skeptical that there's even any mRNA in the shots to begin with. So that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of like, well, what is this self-assembling technology? What's it about? What is synthetic biology? And this was probably, the graphene oxide stuff didn't come on my radar until the end of, I think, 2021, right? So the shots rolled out beginning of 2021, right? Or fall. It was at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, if I remember correctly. And, there's a huge urgent push for everybody to get these things in their arms. And then the research from La Quinta Columna, or the video, started coming out, I think. Well, first of all, there was the stories about transmission, like women with menstrual cycle irregularities, people getting sick, things like that. And I remember these, like there was the 5 Dots, if you guys ever watch that show with Dr. Tenpenny and Larry Pilevsky. And sometimes they have, I think, Carrie Medeg on there, and Christine Northrup, and Lee Merritt, et cetera, et cetera. So they've been talking about this probably in April 2021. And then the videos about the graphene oxide being discovered in the microscopes under microscopic analysis started coming out in June of 2021. And I think Dr. Young published his first videos of microscopic analysis in August of 2021. And this stuff had been sitting in, like favorites and things to watch later, but I really started digging in probably December of 2021. And just to my core, I basically watched every single video that this website called Orwell City had translated of La Quinta Columna, because La Quinta Columna is based in Spain, and all of their videos are in Spanish, right? So some heroic anonymous soul out there on the internet by the name of Orwellito had painstakingly taken the time to translate and subtitle maybe, I think it's probably hundreds of videos now for free, and I've sent them money and stuff online and to help them out. And they did this for almost a year. They went silent probably around April of 2022. It was like some of the last videos that came out. But anybody that watches every single one of those videos from start to finish and, spent like a month and 6 weeks just feverishly consuming as much as they could will get a real education. And it became apparent to me that, all right, there's nothing benevolent about these shots at all. These are some kind of crazy self-assembling synthetic biology technology. And it was a pretty awful realization to come to. And there are also the claims that were made about people being quote unquote vaccinated, like actually emitting Bluetooth signals, which I have not independently confirmed yet. But I have a technical background. I've worked in the IT industry for probably going on 25 years. I've been involved in some on the manufacturing side a little bit with electronics and circuitry and things like that, and used the spectrometers and oscilloscopes. And so I'm not any kind of RF or electrical engineer. I know basically enough to be dangerous, but I'm mostly an autodidact and figure out how to do things for myself. My computer skills are pretty much all self-taught. I never went to university for that or anything. And so, I approach this primarily from a technological standpoint, but ever since I became aware that COVID was a fraud, a medical fraud, then that's really sent me down into researching avenues about terrain theory versus germ theory, virology, which I now believe is an entirely fraudulent segment of the medical industry. And I've always been skeptical of big pharma and kind of understood that for a long time that there's essentially I call it the disease care industry. It's mostly about the care and maintenance of diseases to, milk people for profit, every last step until they expire into the grave. So, I haven't, our family has all natural way born kids at home. We don't, we try to watch what we eat. We don't really ever go to the doctor except if there's some kind of trauma or emergency situation. And that's just kind of how we've lived our lives. I mean, I guess it's kind of, it's not standard, but it's not uncommon out here in California, right? So, I guess what has led me to be on this call primarily is when I made the connection between the COVID operation being part of the synthetic biology transhumanist agenda, and then I started revisiting Morgellons because I remember the fibers, right? And I also heard an interview with Clifford Carnicom that he did with Anna Mihalcia. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. She's a doctor in the Seattle area that's done some great shows over the last few months. If you want to check out her,
she's wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. Yep.
And she had Clifford Carnicom on, and I hadn't heard from Carnicom for a long time. He kind of came out of retirement, and did this interview and was talking about the fibers and what he discovered back in the late 90s and how he turned it into the UK and got stonewalled. I was like, son of a bitch, part of my friends was like, son of a bitch, that this technology has been around at least since then and been deployed primarily through aerosol spraying, and now they're injecting it directly into people. But it was the same sort of phenomenon of this synthetic biology and artificial life, which I think has been raining down on the planet now for more than 25 years. And the injection campaign, the bioweapon injection campaign, is just the latest escalation of that. in conjunction with a major escalation in the amount of radio waves, and I'll call them, I kind of stick with for terminology. I'll just call it wireless radiation, but the EMFs, electromagnetic fields, EMRs, electromagnetic radiation. I think the key here is that this is man-made electromagnetic waves and signals and radiation, and it's the distinguishing aspect of it being that it's usually polarized, meaning the waves travel in one direction. If you've ever taken some polarized sunglasses and kind of turned them at 90 degrees and noticed that it blocks all light, that's an example of polarization at work, right? So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Anyways, I've been aware. The other thing is that I became aware about, when I started having children about 10 years ago, of the electrosmog issue and wireless radiation, the health dangers. And so we take great steps to essentially eliminate wireless radiation not only from our home, but just basically pretty much every aspect of our lives that we have control over. And that means that, we haven't had Wi-Fi in the house for years. And even then, it was only turned on intermittently for, a long time just to be able to use a tablet or something. But I finally broke myself of what I call wireless addiction for good a year ago. So I was kind of like clicking on the Bluetooth, doom scroll on the couch with the phone, and I would use turn on the cell phone just to make a call or check some messages, and that sort of thing. But no, I just finally got to the point where I've been able to eliminate that entirely from my life. So I'm talking to you on a smartphone, but the smartphone is plugged into a special Ethernet adapter so that my network connection runs over a wire, and I'm not using any wireless. So, anyways, but it's all these aspects, I think, are coming together. It's the man-made wireless radiation, the synthetic biology that's being deployed through a variety of vectors. I believe it's coming in through the air in the form of aerosol spraying. I think it's being introduced covertly into our food supply products and possibly water systems, and also, of course, the injections for people that are still haven't really figured out what that's about yet. So
and that's interesting. We're figuring it out. People are starting to wake up. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but they are little by little. They are. But go ahead.
Yeah. So it's become apparent to me. I mean, this is my kind of current understanding of worldview, is that some oil, some forest, and who even knows if it's even human, but is attempting to re-engineer the entire ecosystem of life on Earth into some kind of crazed synthetic biology, transhumanist form, and essentially replace or extinguish all the previous, I guess carbon-based, natural, God-given, whatever you want to refer to it, life with something very, very terrible and evil, for lack of a better term. So I'm trying to understand how to, how the system works, and then also how we can defend ourselves from take countermeasures. And so I made some connections with some other pretty sharp individuals online that have been digging the same thing, and they're approaching it more from a technological standpoint. They turned me onto Tony Pempe. I always stumble over. Tony Pempe.
We've had him on our call. He's a good man, a very smart man.
Yeah. So and I'd heard of Tony before, but honestly I just kind of written him off as kind of a kook, before I got this far in my understanding. And now it's like, oh wow, Tony was talking about nanoparticles and nanotech and self-assembly nanotech, at least as far back as 2016, if not further. And I'm sure probably Cliff Carnicom has been doing that for even longer. But
yeah. Hey, somebody gifted me one of his nano buckets, and I put my legs in it and put the stuff in there, and gobs and gobs of fibers came out. I'm like, I've got the video of it.
Okay, amazing. Well, that's one of the things I want to be able to do and think to share is actually reproduce the results. I mean, I'm not like any official kind of scientist, but the idea is that your experiments are reproducible and that you have a control, right? So now I'm trying to think of how to create a good control. Maybe it would be a nano bucket that doesn't pulse the magnetic radiation and see if stuff came out as well, right? But I'm in the process of building my own, and I've seen some other people that have had some pretty good innovations on Tony's original design. And I do have a little bit of electronics and electrical manufacturing background, so that I have the skills to be able to do this and maybe even improve upon it a bit. So I'm excited to actually see what happens. I mean, I have a feeling, if the theory is true, that most all of us on this planet right now are loaded up with these poisons, really, these nanotech poisons. And we got to figure out how to get them.
I actually took a white piece of fabric, and I filtered the water through the white piece of fabric, and then I scoped it all afterwards. I had like nano chips in there and hexagons and bug wannabes, and oh my God, it was a mess. Yep.
Just a nightmare. And let me end with that, guys. I think, Lisa, I might have told you this the other day when we had spoken privately. I was a salesman, and I was a salesman for 5 years while I had this. I got laid off during COVID.
Yes.
And I was a salesperson, so I was in constant contact with customers, and I'm a very perceptive person. And I'm going to tell everybody in this call, and I'm not the only person that does this. There's other people on this call and other people that have been on this call that have the same problem, they have the same situation. I turn people on by my body act. Okay, so here's proof. With Clifford Turnicon, Harold Costello, many others.
I didn't get booted. I think he got booted because my timer's still going. Lisa, are you there? I can read comments, but I can't hear anything. And the video timer's still going. So if you can hear me, I'm going to try to comment.
Building inside, and I stepped away. I said I have to run to the washroom real quick, and I heard the guy when I walked away. I had my friend from the call. I had him on my phone. I said, "Listen to this," and he heard it. They were saying stuff about me. He goes, "Did you feel that when he came in?" The guy goes, "Yeah, I felt like an electrostatic." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm itching, man. Are you itching too?" "Yeah, it's gone now." When he walked away, it's gone. So when I came back, I confronted them. I said, "Guys, I overheard you." And he says, "Yeah, what?" So I had to lie to him. I said, "Well, I was around a bunch of fiberglass insulation," because I didn't want him calling my boss, and all of a sudden I'm getting, taken to, some kind of happy veil, and they're going to put me in a plastic room. Guys, this is real. I turn people on with I'm activated. So when I get around people, I temporarily activate them. As soon as I leave, it goes away. There's a woman that was like a family friend to ours. She was like an adoptive grandmother. She's in her 80s. She hasn't been around for a while coming by, but a couple of years ago, she was coming to my house to see the kids, and she come in my house, and she confided in me. She says, "You know what, Mark?" She says, "When I get near you, my fingers and my hands itch terrible, but when I leave your house, it goes away."
Yep.
So this is proof, guys, that it's everywhere. It's in everybody.
You betcha. That's exactly what I say. Everybody's got it.
But Seth, so you sound like an extremely intelligent man. You're the way you speak, you present yourself very well. And if you ever really want to speak to Harold Costello, I have his cell phone number, and I will call him and see if he'll speak to you. He's a very busy man, but this guy, Harold's been putting. I'm not Harold Costello. I mean Tony Pantaloresco. I'm sorry. There's a brain fart for you. No, I don't have Harold Costello's cell number. Take that back, everybody. Tony Pantaloresco. If you ever want to speak to him, I could, get you connected, and also, his products, I do believe, work. We have several people on this call that have the devices. The problem is a lot of people, they don't stay on it for a long period of time, and so I guess there's no way really knowing if this thing or not. But Tony's mantra is like this, and you, Lisa and Tammy, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Tony kind of says that you have to, short the operating system. That this is the nano is being controlled.
You need electromagnetic pulses.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think electromagnetic pulses is kind of like what Seth was just speaking of, I think he is like right on track there, and I don't think he got to the rest of what he was trying to develop or do.
Yeah,
But
we're about to finish. So, yeah, so go ahead, Seth. Why don't you continue with what you were saying? Because I didn't get off. I just wanted to kind of work with what Candy was saying. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so there's a lot you guys covered there, but I'll just try to respond to a few things and then move on with where I was. So with regards to it being real, and you knew it was real because of your talent for making people itch, for activating them. You know, I knew this was real when I put two and two together, and I discovered that I could smell certain people that have been injected, and I call it the toxin stink. And there's this kind of peculiar odor that's kind of a mix. A lot of people describe it as fabric softener plus body odor or kind of rotting flesh. And I'm smelling this at places out in public, and I didn't really know. I thought there was something wrong with my nose or some smell after COVID, because I noticed certain things smelled off, and I kept smelling this kind of, and it was like the fabric softener smell. I noticed like certain products like dish detergent, things like that, smelled off to me, and I could never really kind of put my finger on it. And then I think it was Dr. Ariana Love had a show where she was talking about transmission and mentioned the smell, and I just like, you know, I just like had a light bulb on. I was like, son of a bitch, that's what I've been smelling. And when I was out in public, I was in an amusement park down here a few months later, and I was standing in line behind somebody. I could just, this stink was just like boiling off of somebody. I was on a flight back from Europe after they dropped some of the prescriptions, and I sat next to a big, tall, sweaty guy, and it was just boiling off of his body. It was awful, like 9 months, 9 hours back. And so, and some of these times when I travel, I would come back home and I would have this headache where it felt like there was a huge vein deep in my brain that was about ready to burst. It was like, so I think I was dealing with the effects of transmission or so-called shedding. And so it was very real to me, like something was deeply, deeply wrong when I realized I could smell the people that had been injected, and something was, something horrible was happening in their bodies, and I could actually smell it. Now, Jeff Rentz had done a show on there, which is pretty interesting, where there's a link that I can send you if you want, Mike, the chart of the different volatile organic compounds. And if you don't know what volatile organic compounds, it's sort of like things that will change from liquid to gas before the boiling temperature of water. So if you carpet put into a home, you smell that new carpet smell or a new car smell. And what you're smelling is the volatile organic compounds. They're actually chemicals that are outgassing from the material and will continue to do so quite some time. And some of them are actually quite bad for your health. So the Rentz article has a chart of like formaldehyde and different kinds of smells. And I think that is partially what we're smelling is some of these VOCs that are coming off from people that have had the injection. So that said, what were some of the other topics about? Oh, the nano buckets and using the magnetic fields to disrupt the technology. So I was pursuing that line of investigation after a period about, my friend told me about the nano bucket, and I back into looking at Tony Pantaresco, sorry. Tony Pantaresco's videos and mining the back catalog and looking at his nano bucket. And, I found this guy named Michael Chapala who passed away a year or so ago. He was based down in Brownsville, Texas.
Michael Chapala was murdered. He was murdered. He didn't pass away. He was murdered.
I suspected.
Oh God, I had connections with him. Yeah, he was murdered.
Okay. So I suspected foul play, but I couldn't really find much information about his death other than a few kind of brief YouTube comments alluding to the fact, that he'd been poisoned. But maybe we can circle back to that. But anyways, Michael Chapala seems to have taken Tony's nano bucket and put on steroids, and he'd actually just released his latest version, which is sort of a whole body coil that you could actually lay down inside of, and it was on a little cart. You could move the coil over the course of the entire body. And one of the videos, he said, this technology is intelligent. He said that one of the things he learned with the nano bucket, the point-to-point electromagnetic field pulse devices he had previously been using, was that he would zap it in one area of the body, and then stuff would disassemble and assemble in another, like in response to his attempts to attack it in certain parts of the body. His response was to build a device that could zap the entire body, so it had nowhere to hide. And I thought that was quite interesting, and it didn't seem to me like, it seemed a little bit more than a coincidence that when he finally released that version of his device that he disappeared, was made to disappear. So, where are they going with that? Yeah, okay, so Michael Chapala, Tony, what else did we there's one other issue that you talked about there, Mike, that I was going to respond to, and then kind of continue my little soliloquy here.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Seth. You're wonderful here, and I love the presentation here. I think Lisa and Candy would concur with that. I think you're well developed.
I remember what it was. Okay, so Tony Pantieresto has been partnering with this guy, who's
you guys got it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's the other major vendor of these nanobiotic type products, and Giannis hosts Tony's podcast now, and Giannis put out some interesting videos, and one of them I saw was like nanotransistors or something like that. It's about a half-hour video, but it has some of the most stunning photography and video of this synthetic biology and been coming out on these victims that I'd ever seen, and it really shocked me. The part of the problem in I think this whole movement against the chemtrails and the Morgellons and stuff like that is that a lot of these people don't have the best technical or presentation skills, and so you wind up with lots of terrible quality video and having another shaky, out of focus video of a chemtrail, just nothing to lend any credibility to the fact that it's going on, right? And I got frustrated with that. You remember, I was really thankful for guys like Patrick Roddy, who were some of the people that were putting out really high quality videos with good equipment that made it absolutely obvious. Okay, this is not a contrail. So I appreciated the fact that Giannis had released this video with such high quality microscopic photographs of the fibers and other synthetic biology that was coming out of the Morgellons victims, because that to me really helps make it real for people, and that's really what opened my eyes. And I drew the connections. Okay, they've been doing this already now for 25 years. Just the injections are just the latest escalation. And so as of a month ago, I've just been going and trying to both discover and archive important videos and wages and things like that have been addressing the Morgellons phenomenon. I've only just scratched the surface, so I'm actually really excited that Virginia has done this call and make these connections with you people that have kind of been in the trench with this medical condition and assault for some of you, I don't know, a decade or more. And I'm excited to learn what kind of knowledge that you have learned as being sort of a veteran in the trenches dealing with stuff. I actually tried to reach out to Mary Lato, who I think was the first person that she actually coined the term Morgellons, and it was her 2-year-old son that was showing these fibers. And I'm pretty sure I tracked her down in Pennsylvania, and I left her a few messages, and she called me back. I haven't talked to her yet. But, she dropped out of sight, I think, around 2012 when the CDC did their bogus study saying that it was, fibers or whatever, and then, shut down the Morgellons Research Foundation. I think donated all the money and whatever to University of Oklahoma, I believe it was, and something else.
Yeah, Professor Wymore, who totally contradicted his statements from 2009 and 2010 using an FBI database for particle examinations. The FBI database could not identify the fibers. They were of unknown origin, and several of those fibers they did not incinerate until temperatures of between 17 and 1900 degrees Fahrenheit. He stated they didn't know what they were. We knew it was something that's not from this earth. And today, his mantra is completely flipped. Oh, I was mistaken. They're just textile fibers. The whole thing goes. It's just like Alex Jones. Alex Jones, the same thing. He was a real whistleblower, and he's totally flipped his mantra. He's changed everything. He's totally changed. He's been a turncoat. He's gone with the other side now, and because of
and it's not surprising that people can be gotten to, because we're dealing with a force or a class of people or whatever they are that absolutely have no scruples whatsoever. So anyway, it's that's kind of been my interest in figuring out where some of these people are now and what did they have to say and what was their experience. Because I have a lot of sympathy for people in the early stages of this. They felt extremely isolated, alone, crazy, and they probably attracted a lot of crazy people into their lives too, and weirdos, and that doesn't really help the situation either. And honestly, that's one of the things that kind of kept me away from this stuff for a long time. I went back and looked at the youth comments, and I would just mind every single comment in this 10-year-old video that some guy had reposted. It was a video of Dr. Gwen Scott and Clifford Carnicom, and they were talking about Gwen Scott had mentioned that some kind of one of the original designers of the Morgellons technology, I think, had been in contact with her, and he was like regretful about what he'd done. He thought he was technology for the military to be used against the enemy, and so on and so forth. And just going back and looking through these comments, I'm like, the schizo stuff in there, and that, this is not to make light of the suffering of the actual victims. Okay, it's just like any sane, rational person that has life waiting to that S show of comments and crazy, the people typing in the all caps, and it's no wonder that they would just throw their hands up and be like this is just nutsville, right? I'm not really sure about this, or you would just drive away. So now there is some gold in there, and I found some. For instance, I found a guy 6 years ago that stumbled on. He said he would pound beers and drink ivermectin, and that was his all right. But he had discovered the ivermectin would blast the parasites out, and that actually helped his condition. So it's little things like that. I'm trying to go back and find out who was on it and for how long, and I watched that talk that Sophia Smallstrom gave. I think it's either Chemtrails Beyond Consciousness or Conspiracy Con. She did two of them. I think it was 2011, 2012. And they're about synthetic biology, life, and the chemtrails and stuff. And I was just blown away. I remember the first time I watched it, it was years ago, and I was kind of in this phase where I was smoking cannabis and watching conspiracy documentaries, because that was the way to really get scared, right? And I saw this show, and I put it on. I remember it just being so disturbing that close in my altered state, I had to turn it off. It was just to even entertain the idea that it was real and that was what was happening was so horrifying to me. I wasn't able to process it at the time. And, here we are a little over 11 years later, and that's exactly what I believe is happening. And it was amazing to me that somebody like that was on top of it, 10, 11 years ago.
So, Steph, it's interesting, because if you want to know what's going on in this world, just turn the television on. It's Hollywood. They do predict it. This is forecasting what's going on. You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's a lot of predictive programming for sure in movies and entertainment, stuff like that. But, and other people have their theories as to why that is. But, anyways, so that's I think that gets us pretty current to where we are now. And I'm kind of interested in marrying the naturalistic protocols and things like that along with maybe some of these technological approaches that are used to either outright zap the nanotechnology and the devices, or at least disrupt their communication so that the body can flush them out. Now, on that topic, I have been talking with another guy who believes that if somebody's been injected, at least once or twice, and he thinks that is actually another level where it forms what he refers to a microcontroller, and he believes that this presence of this microcontroller is sort of like the brain, and it basically locks the other components of the system into place, and that the nanobuckets no longer work. And he said it's actually probably dangerous to use a nanobucket with somebody that's been once or twice or triple injected, because he said if you bust up the system after it's been assembled and in communication, then it actually it doesn't break apart regularly, it's gracefully. And he believes that his theory, anyways, is that it breaking up in an ungraceful manner is actually what's causing strokes or heart attacks and things like that. He suspects, it's just a theory that a lot of these people dropping over are because of microcontroller failure, as he puts it, and that the system breaks. Well, it's interesting. I don't want to interrupt you. I just have to say this, and guys, I have to jump in here because Tony has told everybody on our call, and Giannis, who's been on our call twice. And Giannis is hard to understand in Switzerland. His English is very broken. He's the most intelligent man. And they have both said that people who have received the you-know-what, we won't say it on the call here, but we know what we're talking about, okay? The JAB, okay? That, if they receive that, they cannot do Tony's protocol. They cannot use this equipment. It does not work for people who have been jabbed. Now how it correlates with people who have classic Morgellons, that too is an operating system. So how is it that they know, Tony and Giannis understand that you can bust up the Morgellons operating system, but you can't bust up the operating system from the JAB? I don't know. That's the question. It's interesting that Giannis and Tony come to the same conclusion. conclusion that you don't want to nail about faith is not useful against people that have had my friend called it augmented, and he believes that he's tested like about 60 people with a RF detector, like a little spy hunter thing, and he claims and believes that certain people have been augmented that are actually emitting signals, and he claims to be able to capture Bluetooth packets from them and be able to determine what is coming from a Fitbit or a cell phone versus an actual human being that's been augmented with a wireless,
Dr. Anna, she's proved that too. The other thing about that too, about how even dead people in the graves are giving off these signals. The other ones.
I've seen the videos, and I suspect it is true. I have not reproduced it on my end yet. And I actually ordered one of the products that this guy recommended that he used, and it failed on me within 24 hours. So I sent it in for a return, and I'm going to look for something else. But if I can find enough subjects that wouldn't think I'm testing that, I'm going to be conducting my own experiments too and see if I can reproduce the results. But so a point I wanted to make. You were talking about Tony. You jumped in, Mark, and mentioned about Tony, and then said you can't bucket with people that have been injected. So I think, anyways, my friend's theory is that a lot of these people dying over, it's not really like those are just sort of like the broken eggs in the omelet in this kind of clinical trial that's being rolled out. He doesn't think it's really designed to people so much as it is to augment them and basically advance the transhumanist agenda and essentially wire them up to the Internet of Bodies and Internet of Things. And this will be the data rates for this are going to be really necessary is to push for this so-called 5G network. And look, when I use the term 5G, like people need to understand that it's a marketing term. It just means fifth generation wireless. And under that umbrella, the implementation is going to differ depending on what country you're in, what telecom provider you're using. The frequencies could vary. So now, in the public's mind, 5G has become this sort of like boogeyman term, and I'm not in favor of it or anything like that. But there's a guy that I follow who actually writes some very excellent and very well footnoted and very information-dense media articles about the whole 5G issue and wireless. And his name is Peter Tachi, and he writes for Activist Post. And I highly recommend, if you want to get a better handle on understanding the wireless pollution side of this, is to read his articles, and it will definitely help clarify your thinking around the issues in 5G. And one of the points he makes that I have come to agree with is that 5G alone, like single focus on 5G, just like, for example, single focus on graphene oxide, while neither is both of them are a problem, right? But to focus solely on the 5G or just the graphene oxide is a form of gatekeeping and misdirection. Okay, so you can't just demonize 5G and say that's the problem without also putting 4G, 3G, 2G pulse digital forms of wireless radiation under the microscope and reevaluating should we even have these networks up and operating. And my opinion on that is no, hell no, because I believe these networks are actually devastating not just human life, but all forms of biological life on this earth, plant, animal, insect, bees, etc. And people are so addicted to their so-called smart devices. I call them, I try to make fun of them, like I either call them slave phones or retard phones because they make people retarded. And they're so addicted to their wireless mobilis that, sometimes it's a little down through to them because they can't see the problem with the transmitter in their hand. And the attention, it's almost the attention black hole that these devices are. That it's going to be even harder to get them to see the problems with these post-digital wireless mobile phone networks. Forget about whether or not it's 5G. I think the 4G is just as much a problem as if anything. So, I think the 5G is there to enable the transhumanist Internet of Bodies and things like that. It's just basically a nightmare. Dystopian future of total surveillance and self-driving cars. It's basically smart cities as for open air prisons. So those should be stopped and halted and dismantled as well. But now we've even got it coming from the sky in the form of I think 12,000 low Earth orbit satellites. And again, depending on your cosmology, I mean, look, I know there's people that And I'm sympathetic to this point of view that the Earth is flat and satellites are actually satellites and things like that. So I'm not gonna get too much into the both sides of that. But suffice to say that we're being bombarded with a new source of radiation from the sky too. And a little personal story about mine and how I kind of drew connected some dots with that in a little bit if you guys want. But I'll just take a minute for a breather here if anybody has any questions or if you have any other things that I haven't covered, Mark, about sort of my journey and how I got to where I am. Please let me know.
Oh, no. This is wonderful. And does anybody have any questions for Steph?
I think he's dead on. I can tell you that much. I definitely agree with what he's saying.
Okay, good. Well, I'll roll into it. So when I just a little my personal story, like.
Oh, just a second, Seth. I'm sorry. Seth, I was taking a drink of water myself. I have one quick question for you. I actually have a comment. Something that I saw Dr. Anna in a recent video that was by my sister. Anna stated that what you said was spot on because you said necessarily to kill off humanity as much as it is to us. I think the killing off is going to come later down the road. Because I think what Dr. Anna stated was that these doctors are finding huge gelatinous clots, fiber clots that are in some cases 4 to 6 feet long. They're pulling these fibrous clots out of dead bodies that are being prepared for embalming procedures, and even people that are in the hospital, and they're dying from strokes and heart attacks. Because we all know what happens when the body throws a clot. I mean, if it goes to your lungs or your heart or your brain, you're dead. Okay, pretty much. These things are huge. And I think what Dr. Anna said is that she thinks that this whole thing happened too fast and that these things are growing at such a rapid rate that they're forming in the body and it's actually happening too quickly. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's plausible. I personally prefer not to call them clots because it's not the structure is not the
right. It's fibers, right?
Yeah. So, well, I think artificial tissue or synthetic tissue might be more. Like one of the things I've learned over the last 10 years is that many of the ways that we've been subverted and defeated is with the use of language. So I'm really kind of a stickler for terminology, and I always. I will admonish people for using the term vaccine incorrectly because what you're doing is you're repeating the lie. You're reinforcing the lie when you use the enemy's language and the enemy's false terms, and you're preventing people from thinking clearly about issues when you don't use proper terminology for things. So I'm not just trying to pick on you, Mike, but that's why I'm very particular. Like I would never refer to these things as clots myself for that very reason. But anyways, that said,
I would just say the clotting aspect, yeah. We know it's way more than a clot.
We know it's important. Again, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if clot word has been basically put out by the enemy, but vaccine definitely is, right? So they did the definition of that term, and you can go back and look at the historical explanation of vaccine or definition on the CDC's page, and I found the different pages have changed in 2014 on the Wayback Machine when they dilated the definition to include the new mRNA technology, which is not technically a vaccine. And I think all of vaccine theory and virology is bogus, okay? But the mRNA is not an attenuated form of a pathogen, okay? That's traditionally what a vaccine is. So anyway, that's kind of a side note. But yeah, to short answer, yes, I think Anna's theory about that like out of control, maybe it's happening too rapidly is definitely plausible. I don't. I've seen those clots being pulled out of the court, and it's revolting. I mean, it's very, very gnarly to see that. And but the other thing is that as far as the depopulation goes, like in the West, in most other industrialized countries, the birth rate is already well below replacement levels, and a lot of people don't understand. Like most Western countries, it's around like 1.2 is the fertility rate. Well, fertility rate of 1.2 for those of you that haven't penciled this out enough. That is a 90% population reduction in 4 generations, if I remember correctly. 90%, that's a collapse. And so we're already on that track on the West for well over, almost as long as I've been alive, okay? And so the population is already, even if this hadn't come out, the population in the Western desert would be collapsing. The only places where you have the opposite, I think the highest birth rates in the world are, if I remember correctly, last time I looked, was Afghanistan and Nigeria, with about 6 or 7 births per mother. So you look at the exploding population. Now, Afghanistan obviously has a lot of war and things like that keep a limit on the population. But in Africa, holy smokes, I think the Indian, which is about 4 times the size of the United States, probably had a population of something like 250 million in the 50s, and now it's up to 1.2 billion. And I think Nigeria in 4 years, between like 2010 and 2014, added like 75 million people just to that country. So it's going. Certain areas of populations are breeding with like bacteria. They're basically breeding like bacteria with no respect to whether or not they're going to have the resources to support them or not. And that's either going to lead to 2 things. It's going to either be like starvation and famine, or that plus, hordes of people that are going to be pouring into Western countries where the population is collapsing and telling us, oh, you don't have the young workers to support your older retiree populations that we're busy killing off with the toxins and stuff like that anyway. So it's a very, very stable and scary and situation that the company, but more importantly, that our children and our grandchildren are going to be facing. And so, from my observation where I sit, it's not even in question that this bioweapon has been targeted primarily at Western countries and Asian countries to a lesser extent, and I think that's because there's a clear anti-white agenda that basically exterminate or erase or reduce to irrelevance European peoples, which I think are the basically one of the populations that is most resistant on top of this, that is going to fight back against this agenda. And so there's a lot of factors that play into this thing and that are kind of swimming together to make a maelstrom of the perfect storm. And I don't want to see my people and my children and stuff reduced to basically irrelevance or extermination. And barring some sort of very severe or harsh corrective action, that's kind of like the path that we're on. So, and I can't sit idly and allow that kind of future to deliver my children into some kind of nightmare future like that. I'm gonna do everything that I can in my power to fight against it and to try to right that ship so that they have a life, they have a future ahead of them. So that's part of what drives me as a father and somebody that's I'm already halfway through the journey. I guess there's some people in this thing that they're older and they may or may not have kids, and they've sort of adopted this mentality of like, well, man, they're just going to rise to a higher level of consciousness and look forward to the transition and everything else. But to me, a lot of people, in my opinion, are using this as a form of cowardice so that they don't really have to fight back, and they can kind of turn a blind eye and to look at what kind of world that their children or grandchildren or even other people from their generation are going to have to live in, and so that's I just wanted add that sort of perspective on it, because a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. It makes them comfortable about the demographic situation, things like that. But here in the United States or in Canada and things like that, all you have to do is take a look at what's going on with the borders and this kind of unlimited immigration. And these people, they're not coming here. Well, some of them are. A lot of them just come here for needy, right, to improve their lives materially, and they see this kind of gravy train of the Western countries, and want a better lifestyle and things like that. And some of them, a minority, like actually are attracted here for ideological reasons. That's the kind of people that you do want immigration. But like if you look at what's going on the southern border, like I live in Southern California, okay, and I've seen what's happened to this town, especially over like the last 10 years. And it's kind of it's honestly kind of disturbing to think of like this having a totally the state of lawlessness. It's getting what's going on in California and the current administration regime in here. It's definitely it's going south, and it's going south fast. I think it's going to continue to get worse here for the near future until things turn around. But I personally, I'm going to stay put as long as I can. And there's a lot of people that have already pulled up stakes and fled inland and things like that. And I don't wish them any ill will, but I do see a lot of people that are willing to tuck tail and run way before they, plant their feet and put up any kind of meaningful resistance to. So I think, part of this thing is there's a character test and a character development aspect to it that is that is an important part. It really like a looking of ourselves and basically sort of a trial by fire, if you will, of who we really are and what we're really made of. And COVID has been a huge reveal for me along that standpoint. Like, who was willing to put on what I disparagingly refer to as the cuck muzzle, and who wouldn't, and who really had a spine and who didn't. And the results have been, kind of surprising. I mean, I'm sad to say that all of my family, for the most part, has taken a jab, but I'm more of my immediate family. But on my wife's side of the family, I think only one or two people did. So it seems to there seems to be like certain threads that run through people's families. I mean, half of my family is pretty, mentally entranced by, I'll say, the allopathic medical system. So it doesn't, and I'm of course like the black sheep conspiracy nutter of the a different way there, but
I'm that way too. Don't feel bad, son. I've been always labeled as the nutmeg in the family.
And you know what?
And you know what they do? You know what I tell people, Seth? I say, you know what? I'm not the conspiracy theory. I was that asshole that was right all along.
Yeah, and honestly, like I'm not special, and neither are you in that standpoint. It's like the story is almost so cliche that it's almost like instant recognition of that dynamic, right? And, I've talked to so many people where they're like the only person in their family that saw through it and held out, and things like that, or were coerced into getting injected with the slow-acting lethal bioweapon, just to keep their job or something like that. But yeah, I haven't been religious for most of my life, but I've definitely the last, especially since COVID, have disabused me of my previously more or less materialistic worldview, and I do think there's definitely more to this existence universe that is conventionally recognized by mainstream science, whatever that is. But I'll just say more of a materialistic worldview. And I'm not a Christian, but I have made a lot of great friends that are Christian and people of faith, because a lot of those people, I think, seem they're not the only, but a lot of them that have like the inner strength or spiritual strength or whatever you want to call it to confront these issues and actually to wrestle with them without kind of, I think, having a mental breakdown or their minds melding. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Do you guys have any questions? Or sorry, I'm gonna have to get up and get a drink of water.
Get a drink of water. I want to say one thing, guys, and I'm going to open it for some questions here. This is something I want everybody to understand, and I say this, Lisa and Candy. I tell people to understand the present and the future. In other words, to be awake, okay, you first must understand the corrupt and criminal past, especially this country. This country is like 270 years old, and from the very beginning, they've been lying to us. Our forefathers were not these great Christian forefathers men that wanted to come here and build this great country. They were Freemasons. They tainted past. But you don't even have to go back that far. All you got to do is go back 20 years ago, 21 years ago. Go to 9/11. Research that incident.
All of it.
And I'm telling everybody on this call and on your podcast, if people could realize what a farce and cover-up that whole entire thing was, they would never trust one thing that came out of the media's mouth or the government's mouth. There would be a coup, there would be a revolution, and there would be a changing of the guard real quick. But the problem is, there's so many faults in that whole thing. And it's just like the Kennedy assassination. Same thing on a smaller scale. They killed the president in a motorcade in Dallas, Texas in 1963. Broad daylight, news cameras everywhere, police officers, thousands of people gathering, and they murdered them deceitfully and secretly, and they covered the whole thing up. And everybody, all the so-called conspiracy theorists were saying for years and years and years, the CIA and the mob did it. Well, now mainstream news is starting to say CIA had involvement. Well, no kidding. But they had to whitewash it all the years. They could wait till everybody that was involved is dead and gone. and they could still whitewash it. But I think you guys would agree that in order to understand where we're at right now with this whole COVID hoax and all the other crap that's going on, you must first learn the path and realize how you've been lied to. You've been lied. It's like George Carlin said, the big club, and you and I ain't in it, and they're jamming that big red, white, and blue penis up your keister.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it's very true. They've been poisoning our food, our water. The vaccinations have been poisoned. They've been poisoning us for decades. And it's not going to stop. It's just going to get worse because this is their plan. But go ahead. I've said too much. So does anybody have any questions?
No, but we're going to have to jump off for us, okay?
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
I wanted to ask us because he was saying that he thought it would take like 4 generations to get the population down 90%. And I'm wondering if he's aware of or has he read the Eagle report, which is the military, and they predicted that the population would be down 70% in the United States by the year 2025.
Yeah, I didn't read the Deagle report, and if it is to be believed, then obviously they're saying that it's very terrible what's going to be happening. You don't have to reduce the population that much by 2025, which is 2 years away.
Do you think that it's possible that it could have already happened with the jabs? I mean, it's about 70% of the people that got the jabs.
Yeah, if there's in fact more of a population elimination objective, the transhumanist one, then yeah, that would make sense. I mean, I just don't know. Like, listen, go ahead.
It's not that it's more of their. Both of them are in effect, but I'm just saying that I think that they have attempted anyway. We'll see if it works or not, because there are a lot of doctors who are speaking out about how to reverse damage that has been done by the protein. So we'll see, but I think it was their intention to reduce the population by a large percentage with the jabs first, and then with what's left of with whoever survives, they've also got the nano in them, and then after that they start focusing on turning us into transhuman. I mean, I don't know. I just thought the Deagle report was really very telling about the fact that they were predicting the population would be down 70% in the United States by the year 2025. That's only 2 years now. And I think that the jabs aren't affecting everybody exactly the same way. Many people have died of heart attacks, myocarditis, young people that didn't really have any heart trouble before and dropping dead. That's very telling. But I don't think that everything was intended to all happen at one time, because if it did, then we'd all figure out really fast that it was the jab, So some people probably got distilled water, and it's still just the fact that they're predicting 70% down by 2025. That's like, that's not taking 4 generations to reduce the population.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
but
I don't know. I mean,
did you want to add something else, or is that just?
No, I don't. No.
Okay. So, yeah, just let me respond to that. Your question, or
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Wait, Mary, let him respond, and then Mary can answer the question.
Sure.
So the point I was trying to make with the 90% population reduction across 4 generations was basically the pre the COVID scamdemic, pandemic operation. The Western nations were already for basically a population collapse, absent of any kind of death shot campaign. Okay, just based on the existing demographic, absent any immigration, right? So it depends on to exterminate the populations of these Western nations and just import people from all over the world to fill their shoes, if they, assuming that he can be filled, or if the legal population, and then if you, so I guess from my standpoint, look, I'm a white American, right, and it's like white Americans are going to be reduced 90%, given existing birth rates, and that is basically a collapse, shot or no shot. So, and then to respond to the other point about the transhumanism versus depopulation, if your goal is to essentially hijack and reboot or transform all existing life on Earth to a transhumanist synthetic biology engineered one, then it wouldn't make sense, in my mind, to kill off the exact population that you've successfully implanted with the latest version of the technology, allowing all of the so-called purebloods. And really, most of us are not purebloods because we've already had, there's very few people here that have never had an injection in their life. And I also believe that they're seeing this technology in things like dental, not vaccines, but painkiller injections, things like that too. I think that a lot of the stuff's manufactured in China, and I think that they're putting the crap in there as well. So, and I'll circle back to another point, but it's why did you kill off all the people that took the injection just to leave the purebloods alive if your goal is to flip the population and make sure that your synthetic biology engineered transhumanists are supposed to supplant them? It doesn't make any sense. And then, secondly,
I understand that, but that doesn't mean that the people that didn't take the injections are not susceptible to being forced into transhumanism by other means, such as the nano that a lot of people are already experiencing. And with the Morgellons, that came way before the injection.
Agreed. And there's there's none of this you have to give them your consent nonsense, which I think is another kind of pacifist coward code, because we're all forced to read this stuff without our consent, if unless you want to live in a separate air, contained system bunker, right? And so we're already being loaded with the nanotech and the poisons and things like that through the aerosol spraying, probably through the food, by the water, and all these other routes pre the injection campaign. So I just think the injection campaign is just the late escalation in this pre-existing campaign and or operation or agenda, whatever you want to call it. And you're absolutely right in that those of us that have avoided the injection so far are also vulnerable to contamination or implantation by a variety of other vectors, and that obviously be in the air through the aerosol spraying, but also through covertly putting them into flu vaccines, putting them into dental anesthesia, putting them into IVs. Like my other friend who's been testing people and claiming that he's been finding them emitting radio frequencies and that they're emitting Bluetooth things. Says out of the 60 people he's tested, 2 dozen of them, 24 people, never got the COVID injection. Okay? And he said, this one person went in for another person, had some dental work done. This other person, did this or that. So he claims that they're actually being successfully implanted or augmented just because they've been exposed by other avenues that did not include the overt COVID injection. So we're.
Seth, can I intervene something also, Jenny? And I know just hang on, Mary, because Mary, your question's coming up next. I didn't forget about you. I just want to say I think where Jeannie's coming from, and I do understand and see where she's saying this. It's not just a Beagle report. He had the Georgia Guidestones, which got vandalized and taken down back in 1978. They were erected. Nobody really knows who put them up. They were 4 granite slabs in 12 different languages or something like that. And basically it said in the future, the cull the population, control, blah, 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 to make the planet whole again. But you also hear of these agendas, declassified government documents, agendas 2020, agenda 2021, agenda 2030, And it is elimination of a large percentage of the population. They want to get rid of the useless eaters. They want to have control over just a little over maybe 1 billion people so that they can control them. They're going to have super soldiers. They're going to have what they want, and they're going to have freedom to do what they will. I think that's where Genie's coming from. There's been more than just the Deagle report. The Deagle is one of many entities that have been preparing the world for a huge culling, where there's going to be a massive amount of life. And the other thing, which I know, and trust me, I'm not, everyone's entitled to their own religious opinion. I don't force religion on anybody, but as myself, being a Christian, reading the Bible, I will tell you that the Bible itself in Revelation says that 2/3 of the population will be destroyed. So the Bible and everything, the Bible is amazing because of what's in there. It says in the last days that there's going to be plagues and pestilences. I mean, this is the pestilence. This is the plague. We're not going to be human. This happened back into Noah. That's why God had to destroy the earth with a flood, because it was already transhumanistic things going on back then. So what I'm just saying is, I see where Genie's coming from that standpoint. I'm not arguing against you, Seth. I'm just saying I think there's a lot of entities and other avenues out there and information out there that's been for a number of decades that was talking about that the population would become very small. And even Henry Kissinger, in an address to the United Nations, and I think it was in the mid-1990s, he said we have to accept this, meaning we have to eradicate 5 billion people from this planet. Nelson Mandela also mentioned that. So I just wanted to throw that in, and I'll shut my mouth and let you finish, and then Mary next with the questions. Go ahead.
All right. Well, my counter to that would be like, if you look at history, like the only way to really exterminate a population is to get them to stop reproducing. Okay, famine won't do it. War won't do it. As long as people have healthy birth rates, it'll always bounce back. Okay, so you have to ask yourself why continent of Africa is only 5 or 10% injected and is continuing to grow. Like basically, the population there is growing out of control without the resources to support it, absent of a ton of Western money and technology and industrialized agriculture and grains and stuff pouring into that continent to support it. Are they just going to let them starve? Is there going to be a famine? Like, if your goal is to reduce the population of the Earth to 500 million, then why is Africa essentially untouched compared to the Western industrialized world?
My opinion.
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I agree with that, but maybe they're going to use Africa as the people that they got to keep somebody around.
I think it goes back into the Bible. I think it goes back into Egypt. Just like you had mentioned the Bible and so many things, in the gold and the silver, it was right there in Africa. For some reason, they've been blessed, but also cursed. Because you look at all these people that are feeding the people in Africa, they're starving, they don't have water, they don't have food. So they're being blessed and cursed. I can say it's like yin and yang. Then maybe a certain percent of the population hasn't gotten the vaccination. And the other certain part of the population is flourishing. But remember, AIDS was in Africa. They did their first AIDS pandemic in Africa. They experimented on the people in Africa. Therefore, my opinion, Africa is being cursed and blessed.
Yeah, but you're just none of those pandemics or anything make any kind of dent in the population. Why? Because they have a very high fertility rate, and I don't see the fertility rate being reduced anytime soon. So again, if your goal is depopulation, why would you leave? One of the 75% of the population of Africa essentially untouched with this injection, if the injection is for depopulation. It doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. Now, the only two countries in there with this refuse to inject people or go along with it, those leaders are dead. And my hats off to those men, respectfully, standing up for their own people.
Absolutely. The Tanzanian president was one. They murdered him. The Tanzanian president.
I agree. But people have to see, I don't know, I just don't find the depopulation arguments super compelling when I see what's going on in Africa. It doesn't add up. I think, more of dealing with the problem population, but most people, that mean, you can see like that.
Well, what about China? What about China? I mean, they're not too bad. If we're talking about depopulation, China has got the highest population of they have the most people on there.
Actually, that's correct. I think India is actually surpassing us.
Is India surpassing? Okay, well, I knew they were not connected with India, but either way, they're the top three. Let's put it that way. They've been told they can't have more than 1 or 2 children. They're the ones that are being poisoned probably a lot quicker than us in America. I mean, I think they got to get rid of the Chinese. I mean, if you're seeing all these weird things in the videos, a lot of stuff is happening in China. There were people dropping dead in the streets when COVID first came out. And I absolutely believe that was the 5G, it was the 60 gigahertz that were killing the people because it wasn't happening in the United States. It's not normal to walk out of a grocery store, carrying a bag of groceries, crossing the street, and the street of groceries falls to the ground, you're dead. You ride this bicycle, falls to the ground. You didn't see that happening here, but you saw it in China. And, and that's a huge population. So I think if they're they're starting in the right place. Maybe they just haven't started yet. Maybe Africa will be third on their list. I mean, maybe that's a possibility. I mean, they got to get rid of the Americans because the Americans there's too many people. We have more guns in this country. There are more gun owners in this country than every other country in the world combined. And that's what the agenda of the left wing is to disarm the American person to take their weapon away because you can have a lot more control. As New Zealand and Australia have already figured that out. You take their weapons away, you can control the people. That's why we supposedly had our Constitution protect us. But you got that's in office right now that would eradicate and eliminate every single gun. And then of course they got these
You also got to understand there's a lot of gun holders, but they've got their background check and everything. But there are more guns in this country illegal than it is owned by gun holders.
Well, that's all done by design. Absolutely. But they want to disarm the regular. Go ahead, Mary. I feel bad. Mary's been wanting to ask a question. Go ahead, Mary.
No, what my question goes right into it. Okay, so I'm Mary in Denver, and basically, at Frank speech, like Frank Sinatra, except this is Frank speech, they've got Dr. Brian, Dr. Lee Merritt. They've got lots of frontline doctor people who've been interviewed on there and continue, to be interviewed. I don't know if people notice, but China and Russia were not instituted any mRNA. So not one of their military or one of their citizens were. So when those Chinese died, I'm thinking, yeah, that has to be the 5G. Or, I mean, it's got to be EMS because it wasn't the mRNA stuff, okay? Or what, and all the super toxins that they put in ours. So did you know that the Chinese and the Russians didn't get any of that?
I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh yeah. So last weekend on Saturday there was a 4-hour presentation about the borders. Okay, so at the end of the 4 hours, after some of the stuff but some of the stuff you don't. About how much more the human trafficking is the profit as opposed to fentanyl trafficking, the fentanyl stuff that's coming out of China. But bottom line, the guy who was sponsoring this group, I think defending borders, 9/11 or something. But the thing is, the head of Overstock, I forget his name right now, but he said he had lived in China, and he was explaining one of their agendas, which is that because of the British having destroyed so many of the Chinese in about the 1800s, the latter part of the 1800s, with the Opium War, they feel that our country belongs to them. Their agriculture is there to our ability to put people. And he said that all of the all the titles that we have to our property, meaning I'm trying to relate that they aren't injected with this stuff. Okay, so they can kill them by the 5 or the 60 or whatever, but they're not killing them with this dust. But the bottom line was the conclusion of this Overstock CEO was that every one of our titles, all the titles are identified in America, and the incentive is for all of the military to be able to claim our title when they win. I mention this because he doesn't say this because he doesn't know what I'm talking about. And it ties in with, illegals not injected at all. They, in part because of the law, because there isn't any liability because they're not American citizens, so that our laws aren't going to apply, and those vaccine companies want to make sure that they don't get sued by the foreigners who are injured by, this system of injection. So what I'm really, my question is, I want to mention this because I don't think most people know this, but also, what's the issue of shedding? Can you how it sheds, other than we know that the body fluids, the saliva could spread that. Anyway, the nanoparticles and stuff. But how do you know anything about this shedding? Okay. And if you wanted to comment on anything, because what the Overton guy says, basically, they plan to take us over. I mean, I know that that's not, whatever, but this is a plan. So it's not just like, paranoia. It's like it's there,
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, I've heard the claims that the Russian and Chinese militaries didn't either not get the injection or did not get the same things. I really have no way of verifying those. I mean, the closest I can get to it is here in my own home country with people that I know speak the cynical language and can kind of suss out that who I trust and who I don't. So, look, it wouldn't surprise me, but I can't make any comment as to the veracity of those claims. Now, secondly, I think as far as conflicts between world powers goes, there's a fair amount of that where there are, let me just put it this way. Like if this entire globally coordinated response to COVID hasn't, at least opened your mind to the possibility that things are orchestrated in a far more centralized manner than like a multipolar world.
Right. Yes. World Economic Forum, those people behind those people.
Right. So now, is China going to come and invade the United States? I don't know. I've listened to Mike Adams' situation report, stuff like that, and honestly, it's a little bit alarmist for my case. And sometimes I just have to turn it off because I feel like it's just putting me in a dark place, and to your point, and it's not really helping me focus on things that I actually have control over. Now, if the Deagle reports are right, and they're going to invade, take us out, whatever, then I guess, might be time to start building your bunker or fleeing to another world or whatever, if you believe that, or, finding your local good old boys and forming the militia. Now, I'm personally of the opinion that is less likely and with more of the viewpoint agenda to get people paralyzed with fear and in the fear state and then making poor decisions in the fear state. And honestly, if it's going to happen, like I've just resigned myself, like there ain't a heck of a lot that I can do about it except just try to survive when it hits and it becomes apparent. But I mean, if they start, along those lines, if they try to start pushing pandemic 2.0 and it becomes obvious that I'm packing my family up and we're hitting the interstate and we're driving deep inland where we have some trusted friends and family, and that's where they're going to hang out until I can come join them, when I decide whether or not roads are going to be shut down in between states or something. Like, I have a contingency plan for the worst case scenario, but that's not what I focus most of my waking energies and worry about. I try not to worry about suffering things so much as I can, knowing how awful this reality is that all of us are coming to grips with. And then
my thing is really about the shedding part and how 5G is working with with it. I just mentioned the other.
So I prefer not term shedding. I like transmission in place of that because if it's understanding has a lot of baggage with virology, and that basically comes from reject technology. But I don't believe there's any evidence that the typical SARS-CoV-2 virus is a really isolated physical state, as far as I can tell. It exists solely as a computer model in silico, as it were, and it's basically a technology that does exist. It exists as a sequence of the base pair molecules inside of a computer program. And, maybe it could be synthetically manufactured and injected to people,